The stream is alive and well across the internet, and it looks like we are moving and grooving, so let's get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. And over our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with that very justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a thing called justice, and it all starts at the top with the politicians, the people who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and I to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. And that's why we started this program called Watching the Watchers, so that together we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency back down upon that very system with the hope of encouraging some meaningful change. And that's why we're so grateful that you are here and with us today, because it's Impeachment Day. Again, didn't we just do this? We got a lot to talk about. The president was impeached again for a second time. There was some major tension going on in Congress today over on Capitol Hill. I want to provide a little bit of context on what it looks like. We saw a lot of imagery from the Capitol Hill riots, but things are a little bit quieter these days. I want to show you a little bit about what is going on. Some more information as well from the former Capitol Hill police chief who resigned earlier last week or late last week. And he shed a little bit of light on what was going on in the preparations for the Capitol Hill prior to the Capitol Hill riot. So I want to break that down. Mike Pence said he's not going to be invoking the 25th Amendment, which of course led Nancy Pelosi to then move forward with impeachment in the House of Representatives. That happened today. 10 Republicans joined in with the Democrats. And so that is kind of done in the House. We've got a breakdown of what happened, and then we're going to go through the transcript from the Save America rally, the actual language, and we're going to compare and contrast that with the article of impeachment. So today they were moving forward on a single article of impeachment. We now know what they were presenting and what the evidence was going to be. So let's take a look at it. Let's compare what they're upset about with the transcript. So we've got a little bit of an analysis that we're going to go through there. We're also going to talk about what Mitch McConnell may do as soon as this stuff heads over to the Senate. So since Donald Trump has been impeached in the House, just like last time, it now is going to go over to the Senate for a trial. But Donald Trump is out of office next week. So how is that going to work? We've got some information about that. I'm going to give you a quick update on another individual by the name of Cleveland Grover Meredith Jr., who was apparently a Capitol Hill rioter. There is a document now from the U.S. Attorney's Office. They're going to try to keep him in custody pending the entirety of his case, and so we want to show you what that document looks like. That one's a little bit fun, so stick around for that. And then finally, we're going to talk about Lisa Montgomery, who was executed last night. We talked about her story late yesterday on the program. There was an emergency stay, but she is not around. The Supreme Court acted very quickly. They move fast when it's important to them. And so they stepped in and said they could go ahead and move forward with the execution. And so she is no longer with us. No matter what you may think about that, we'll leave it for discussion when we get there. Before we dive into all the material, we have a couple quick reminders. Now's a good time to subscribe. We go live at this time every day of the week, and we want you to be here and with us. A like, a thumbs up, a comment would be very much appreciated because YouTube sometimes keeps us in that political bubble. You know, it's a little bit controversial, so we understand that. As another reminder, I'm going to go through a series of slides. If you want a copy of the slides, those are all available in our Discord server. I try to do my best to source where things came from. A lot of the links and additional information are in the slides. Head on over to Discord, download those for free, as well as a copy of my book is in there, a PDF version if you would like that. All right. Let's get started. Oh, one more thing. There are super chats. So if you have questions or comments, feel free to send those in as I'm presenting. I'm going to present for a little while, and then at the end of the program, we'll have a live chat where all your super chats will be answered. Miss Faith is right back there capturing those and throwing those in my slides. So we'll get to those at the end of the program. So as I mentioned, let's start with Capitol Hill. Let's take a look at what is going on because the imagery is a little bit different. This is some of the imagery that we saw from today. Remember, the impeachment proceedings are going to be taking place in the Capitol building, the same place that last week on Wednesday, 1 week ago, we saw total bedlam, madness and chaos. And so now they're being extra cautious. And so this is what the inside of the Capitol building look like this morning. This was posted by Nathaniel Reed over at Reed Reports. Said just walked into the Capitol to find literally hundreds of troops napping and lining up in the Congressional Visitor Center as the streets around here are largely blocked. Many are cuddling their firearms fatigues over the heads to block the light, and riot gear is in neat piles. So you just see sort of a if you're listening on the audio only, it's just sort of a slew of soldiers just sort of laying on the ground, just filling up this lobby area looking thing. And they're kind of on top of one another and just, spread out and catching some rest prior to the day's antics. A lot of, additional pictures. This one came over from Eric Wasson, says U.S. Capitol is now a military base. Massive show of force outside. The National Guard is armed with rifles and spread just a few feet apart along the perimeter as the House prepares to impeach the president. So once again, we're just looking down a hall here, and you just see soldiers in fatigues. We see some ammo boxes. We've got some of their firearms sort of propped up against the wall, and yeah, it looks like they are sort of boarding in the Capitol building. They're setting up shop, making this thing operational. Some more pictures we have sitting around, some busts. This one looks like it's of Lincoln. And I was reading somewhere that this plaque is actually commemorating another time in American history where troops needed to be posted up at the Capitol building, which was during the Civil War. So right next to this bust of Lincoln, we have this plaque on the wall where they're saying that, all of this is done. See this officer's rifles and assault rifles are here sort of stacked up against the walls, and they're all wearing their masks and just catching some rest. You see here a different image, just massive in scope. We got hundreds, it looks like, or several hundred different soldiers just posted all around the Capitol building, and pretty good, I would say. We certainly don't want a repeat of what happened last Wednesday. I'm very glad that they are there and taking this seriously, because that was awful. Now, from the outside, we've got, some more, it looks like National Guard vehicles. The news, of course, is, standing right in front of them so that they can get them in their images. And it is a total different scene. And we were all sort of wondering why, this wasn't foreseen last week. Where was all of the preparation? We had a letter from Mayor Bowser, who is the mayor of Washington, D.C., that she sent on January 5th, one day before the Save America rally took place. And the letter basically was telling all the I think it was, I forget who she sent it to, but it was, somebody who's in charge of coordinating additional resources like military to come in and assist on these types of events. And she said, we're good. We don't need any help. The Metro PD are good. Capitol Hill Police know what they're doing. We've got it all under control. Don't send anybody else. We don't want you coming in here. The last time you came in here, it was a problem. And so don't send anybody. We got it covered. And then, of course, they didn't. So I saw this article. This article was actually posted, looks like 3 days ago, but I just hadn't seen it yet. And we've been talking about this for some time. I wanted to know a little bit more about what happened. Where was this oversight? We knew for many months that hundreds of thousands or maybe 1 million people would show up to this thing. People were traveling from all over the country. And why were they not as prepared? Why could a few hundred protesters or rioters just sort of overburden the police in a way that they could breach the Capitol, which in my mind I've been saying this should be one of the most, if not the most secure building in the entire country. They just easily just sort of breached it and took it over. Well, this article came out from the Washington Post. It was an exclusive. It says the outgoing Capitol Police Chief says the House Senate security officials hamstrung efforts to call in the National Guard. 2 days before Congress was set to formalize Joe Biden's victory, Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund was growing increasingly worried about the size of the pro-Trump crowds expected to stream into Washington in order to protest. He said that Sund asked the House and Senate security officials for permission to request that the D.C. National Guard be placed on standby in case he needed a quick backup. But Sund said Sunday they turned him down. Oh no. On the first interview since pro-Trump rioters stormed the Capitol, Sund, who has clearly resigned, said his supervisors were reluctant to take formal steps to put the Guard on call, even as police suggested that the crowd Trump had invited to Washington would probably be much larger than some of the earlier demonstrations. The House Sergeant of Arms, Paul Irving, who is the Sergeant of Arms for the House, said that he was not comfortable with the optics of formally declaring an emergency ahead of the demonstration. The Senate Sergeant at Arms, Michael Stenger, suggested Sund should informally seek out his Guard contacts, asking them to lean forward and be on alert in case the Capitol Police needed their help. So Stephen's son, is a retired or resigned police chief now for the Capitol Hill Police. He's coming out and saying, I saw this coming. I asked for help, and then I was turned down from other individuals. Now they're going to the Senate Sergeant of Arms and the House Sergeant of Arms, and so everybody's doing one of these things. Just kind of, wasn't me, was you, right? Nobody knows what is the truth here, but at least it's a little bit more information. We know that the former police chief, Capitol's son, says that he requested this stuff and then he resigned. Okay, if you thought you did the right thing, I'm not sure why you would resign, but he did. The Hill riots ultimately happened on his watch, so he's sort of falling on the sword here, but this was, I think, a systemic sort of failure across multiple agencies. These are what the streets look like over in D.C. You can see nobody's going anywhere. If you wanted to get an Uber, it'd probably cost you $2,000 to get anywhere because you really can't go anywhere, right? You're just going to be sitting around. The White House is completely cordoned off. The ellipse down here, Washington Monument, streets blocked in all directions. We've got, everywhere, right? You go over to the U.S. Capitol, all of those streets are also totally blocked. National Gallery, Smithsonian, and it's a wild time. I'm not sure if they do this every inauguration ceremony proceeding, but this is totally locked down. Jack Posobiec, who's a good follow on Twitter, he's sort of in D.C. very often. I think he's well plugged in with a lot of the Senate aides and advisors and stuff. So he's got a good take on what is going on. He posted a couple videos today from the Capitol, and you can see it is a totally different scene. So here's one video. And what you're looking at is a view of the sort of Capitol Park, and it is totally empty. There are barricades all over the place, and you see those individuals sort of socially distance out around the perimeter. They're about 10, 15, maybe 20 feet apart. Looks like National Guard. He's also zooming in there, and now you see soldiers marching around. Here's another video of the soldiers actually marching sort of the perimeter around the lake near the Capitol building. So they're there, they're posting up. There's the Capitol building, 5 American flags hanging there in the breezeway. And soldiers posted up. Now, my initial thought was, that's not that many soldiers, right? There's a couple handful of soldiers, but I'm going to be guessing that there are many, many more sort of stowed away in the buildings, ready to go. And those were just a couple of, groups who were out there getting some fresh air, doing some, marching or whatever it is they call that, just to stay sort of alert and keep the blood flowing and that type of stuff. So there is an entirely different scene in the Capitol. Donald Trump today released a statement, and this came from the office of the press secretary. Normally something like this would be best distributed on a place like Twitter so that he could communicate to like 88 million people automatically. This would be a good message to get to 88 million people with the click of a button, but they deleted his Twitter account, so he can't do that anymore. So now what he has to do is send this message, which is very good and very helpful, very calming, and we have to just sort of, fax it to each other and Morse code it to people because Twitter kicked him off their platform. Statement from the president released today, January 13, 2021. In light of reports of more demonstrations, I urge that there must be no violence, in capital letters. No violence, no lawbreaking, and no vandalism of any kind. That is not what I stand for. It is not what America stands for. I call on all Americans to help ease tensions and calm tempers. Thank you. So, well, we're going to help the president spread that message here on this channel. And, I would encourage the people to follow that advice. This is not something where I think that more demonstrations are going to be useful or helpful. And it would have been nice if President Trump could have communicated that to all of his followers, but he's been deplatformed from everything. He got just a strike on YouTube. So now YouTube is going to be stopping him from uploading for 7 days, which of course coincides with the next election. With the inauguration that's going to be taking place next week. And then my guess is they're going to just delete him also. He's been canceled from everything, so why would YouTube keep him around? So the writing's on the wall for his channel, even though he is, of course, using his platform as the president to communicate peace, asking for calm tempers, asking to ease tensions, and so on. We have been talking about this week the 25th Amendment because, remember, Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats were sort of doing this bargain. They were sort of floating the idea of impeachment to say we're only going to impeach him if Vice President Mike Pence doesn't invoke the 25th Amendment. The 25th Amendment is something that the executive branch can do in order to remove a president who hasn't been deemed competent to continue to be president. And the way that worked, we ran through that a little bit earlier this week, and Mike Pence would have to go and invoke it and then get a number of individuals on the cabinet to basically certify that the president is incompetent. They would remove him, and then Vice President Pence would be the president. Donald Trump could have challenged it, but by the time the challenge would have gone through Congress, the term would have expired anyway. So Mike Pence didn't do that. We have a letter from him, but the House introduced a resolution that was intending to signify their urge for Mike Pence to go and invoke that 25th Amendment. That was in the House yesterday. It passed at 9:12 p.m. The yes votes were 222 to 204. And you can see it really kind of split along party lines. So we've got all of the blue people on the top for yays. Those are all the Democrats. We've got all the nays down below. And then we have the not votings. Also 7 red. So 7 Republicans just voted or did not vote. And so this passed 222 to 204. But what's it going to do? Well, nothing, right? So here is Vice President Pence sending a letter back over to the House. He sent this. It's 2 pages. Let's run through it so we can understand where Vice President Pence stands currently. He says, "Dear Madam Speaker, America was shocked and saddened by the attack. It was a moment that demonstrated America, people, the unity is still possible in Congress when it is needed most. By now, with just 8 days left in the president's term, you and the Democratic caucus are demanding the cabinet and I invoke the 25th Amendment. I do not believe that such a course of action is in the best interest of our nation or consistent with our Constitution. Last week, I did not yield to pressure to exert power beyond my constitutional authority to determine the outcome of the election, and I will not now yield to the efforts of the House of Representatives to play political games at a time so serious in the life of our nation. As you full well know, the 25th Amendment was designed to address presidential incapacity or disability. Just a few months ago, when you introduced legislation to create a 25th Amendment commission, you said, quote, a president's fitness for office must be determined by science and facts. They're always wanting to go to science. Look at that. You said that we must be, quote, very respectful of not making a judgment on the basis of a comment or behavior that we don't like, but based on a medical decision. Madam Speaker, you were right. Under our Constitution, the 25th Amendment is not a means of punishment or usurpation. Invoking the 25th in such a manner would set terrible precedent. After the horrific events of last week, our administration's energy is directed at ensuring an orderly transition. Then we have a little quote from the Bible. He says, quote, for everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to heal and a time to build up. That time is now in the midst of a global pandemic and so on. January 6th, now is the time for us to come together and heal. I urge you and every member of Congress to avoid actions that would further divide and inflame the passions of the moment. Work with us to lower the temperature and unite our country as we prepare to inaugurate President-elect Joe Biden. I pledge to you, I will continue to do my work in faith and so on to ensure an orderly transition of power. So help me God. So he says, hey, now is the time to heal. Now is the time to come together. We know that there were tragic events on January 6th, but let's not rub it in. Let's not add insult to injury is essentially what Mike Pence is saying. And this is, I think, a good point, right? Donald Trump's going to be out of the office next week. And now, what do they want to do? What is going to calm and heal people? What is going to help a lot of the 74 million Trump supporters who feel like they got shafted out of an election, who have a lot of anger? Well, let's just impeach the president. That's a good way to do it. So that might calm the nerves down a little bit. Well, I don't think so. According to one polling company, a lot of people don't want to see this go on. So I'm not sure how credible this polling company is or what their record looks like, but this came from McLaughlin and Associates. This was posted on Twitter. Looks like one of the only polls that has been sort of floating around that was taken over the last few days, which is why I wanted to talk about it. So they didn't survey a lot of people. They talked to 800 battleground voters on January 10th and 11th, which matches the actual turnout from the November 3rd election, show that voters are opposed to impeachment and big tech censorship. They want a peaceful and orderly transition. 89% of all voters think it is important that Trump lead an orderly and peaceful transition to Joe Biden. 76% it is very important. Only 11% do not think so. When voters are told that Joe Biden will be inaugurated on the 20th, but Nancy Pelosi wants to impeach the president, 60% of they say this is another waste of time and money. So 60% are sort of opposed, 40% are in agreement with that, according to this company. 77% of voters think Congress should make its priority dealing with coronavirus. Only 23% prefer impeaching the president. 48% of all voters are less likely to vote for a member of Congress who votes to impeach the president. Only 36% are more likely, and it just goes on and on and on. Nancy Pelosi's unfavorable rating, 33% to 59%. Chuck Schumer, 27 to 51. Generic vote for Congress favors Republicans over Democrats, 49 to 42. And so they were talking to 800 voters in battleground states on January 10th and 11th, sort of polling whether this stuff would go over well with the American public. So it's just a poll, take it for what it's worth. But that's where this stuff is trending. There's a pretty significant group of people who are looking at this stuff, according to them, that say this impeachment thing is kind of a sham. But that's all right, because the Democrats wanted to get it done, and they did. This is what the vote count total looked like. The Democrats passed this, 221 Democrats, and they were joined by 10 Republicans who did join in passing this. So it was 231 to 197. 197 Republicans voted nay, and 0 Democrats joined in them. There was a total, it looks like, of 5 who were not voting. So I'd be curious to see who those people are. But it's done and over. These were the 10 Republicans who joined. Liz Cheney from Wyoming, I think she's the number 3 Republican in the House. And many people were saying that now that Liz Cheney broke, there was a lot of, sort of a flutter on Twitter last night when Liz Cheney came out and she said, I'm gonna go ahead and support the impeachment of this president. And Donald Trump's been pretty hard on the Cheneys and on Liz Cheney in particular. So it wasn't a big surprise. But what was a surprise that, well, she's number 3 in the House. And so many people were saying that this was the first domino. This is the dam breaking. If Liz Cheney comes out and votes in favor of this thing, you might just see this cascade of Republicans who are also going to be joining her. And that kind of didn't really happen. We see a total of 10. We've got Gonzalez from Ohio. We've got Jamie Herrera Butler from Washington. We got somebody from New York, John Katko, Adam Kinzinger from Illinois, Peter Meijer, Dan Newhouse, Tom Rice, Fred Upton, and David Vallado. So that's where they're from: California, Michigan, South Carolina, Washington, Michigan, Illinois, New York, Washington, Ohio, Wyoming. And those are the Republicans who joined. And, this is a little bit of a heated thing, because a lot of people are saying that these are turncoats. These Republicans stabbed the president in the back, and now they are going to be subject to a primary, and they're going to be challenged this next election. Donald Trump has been promising that for a long time. Some of his children have as well. A lot of people who are staunchly in the Trump camp have been saying that if you don't support him, we're going to primary you. And I fully suspect that they will. I would expect all of those people on that list to get primaried. Now, if you flip that around, if you're on the other side of the aisle, if you're not a particular a Trump fan, and you're looking at this and you're saying, wait a minute, it was only 10 Republicans? Only 10 Republicans joined in on this? What happened to the other 190 of them? Where were they? So they're just endorsing domestic terrorism. They're just in alignment with a seditious coup that was taking place last week. And so, I don't know that Mike Pence is going to be successful in his wish that the nation heal and calm down a little bit. I think that what happened today is just probably going to incite people further, but I'm not so sure that anybody's upset about that. People are sort of really, really jumping on what happened on January 6th and sort of milking it to the fullest extent that they can for their political means. Let's take a look at the article of impeachment. We talked about this earlier this week. There were several drafts that were being floated around, but this was the one that was discussed today. So I pulled this over from the New York Times. When we went through it, it didn't change largely, but what we talked about in a previous episode of this program was the full document. We went through all of the different pages, and it's kind of unnecessary. A lot of it's fluff. So the sort of in 3 parts. One's an introduction that is explaining what the issue is, that the president is, inciting violence or whatever they're saying, and that the House of Representatives has the jurisdiction, the authority to go in and institute the impeachment. So they're just detailing where they get the power to do this, where the rules come from, and why they should be doing it. Then the second part is what we're going to talk about. That is the facts. That is what they're claiming is the problem. They just identified the issue and their authority. Now they're talking about the problem. There's another section where they talk about that phone call with Brad Raffensperger, where he's which is the Georgia Secretary of State, where he was, allegedly President Trump was sort of leaning on him to go find those 11,000 votes. I didn't think that was a big deal. When I went through that, I talked about it. I said it was a settlement conference. They both had their attorneys there, and they're supposed to be talking about votes. Okay, it's a settlement conference about elections. So what else are you going to talk about? So that, in my my mind was just sort of they were just trying to shove that in there to sort of, I think, bolster their argument. But we're going to leave that part out. I don't think it's consequential. Really, everybody is concerned about what happened on Capitol Hill on January 6th, about the language from Trump's speech. And so we're going to spend some time analyzing that. The fourth part is just a conclusion. Based on all of the foregoing, we think that this is warranted, and we're asking that the House consider it accordingly. So let's focus specifically on the claims that they say are problematic. So this is from the article of impeachment itself, and I've underlined in red some of the key language, some of the stuff that they're very upset about. So it says here, on January 6th, pursuant to the 12th Amendment of the Constitution, the Vice President of the U.S., and so on, the Senate met at a U.S. Capitol for a joint session to count the votes of the Electoral College. That was the electoral vote day. In the months preceding the joint session, President Trump, and so let's point this out, okay? They're going back several months. In the months preceding, so it would be between now and the election on November 3rd, they're saying the joint session, in months preceding the joint session, President Trump repeatedly issued false statements asserting that the presidential election results were the product of widespread fraud and should not be accepted by the American people or certified. Okay, so no real clarity about what they're talking about. They say repeated false statements, which I think is still up for a lot of debate. People are still arguing that stuff. And they're saying here that he was saying that the election results were the product of widespread fraud and should not be accepted. All right. So very general. We don't have anything that we can really tee off on. The reason why I wanted to stop there is because if they're going to be claiming that the president did something specific, we want to look at specific language. This is a very, very broad generalization. It's saying over the several months, he made fraudulent claims, false statements, but they're not telling you what those are other than it was widespread fraud and it should not be accepted. Which, is that in it of itself a violation of the law? I mean, those sound like opinion statements. He's saying things. They may be false, but it's his opinion of him, right? And I think that you're allowed to do that in this country still. I'm not so sure what's illegal about that. It goes on. Shortly before the joint session commenced, and I think this is where the crux of the problem that a lot of people throughout America have issues with. Shortly before the joint session started, President Trump addressed a crowd at the Ellipse in D.C. There, he reiterated false claims that, and this is the first quote that we get, a quote, "We won this election and we won it by a landslide," end quote. Okay, so that's the first language, that's the first specific claim that we get here in this article of impeachment that they're upset about. It goes on. He also willfully made statements that in context encouraged and foreseeably resulted in lawless action at the Capitol, such as, quote, "If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore." All right, so now we have some specific language. If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. So a couple things here. Number one, we won this election. We won it by a landslide. Right now, yes, you could say that is a false statement. All of the states certified the underlying elections. It was counted in by the Vice President, Mike Pence, and he certified it. And he's still saying we won it by a landslide, and so he's sort of articulating a different set of facts that he believes. And I think that, that you could make good arguments for, whether you agree with it or not. I think you could make good arguments for that. I'm used to making a lot of arguments that, are sometimes colorful. I think you could make those arguments, and Donald Trump has been doing that for some time. But is that in and of itself illegal? By just saying something that is factually inaccurate, is that illegal? Is that unlawful? Even for the president of the United States, I mean, is that the kind of standard that we want to hold for politicians, that anytime they say something that is not entirely truthful, that they could be impeached for that? Because that would be the entire Congress. That would be our entire government, because they all fib, they all lie, they all manipulate the truth a little bit to serve their ends. So certainly that can't be the standard. Okay, just sort of exaggerating claims, saying stuff that isn't exactly true. No, we would not have a government anymore, right? You couldn't run for office if you couldn't bend the truth a little bit. And that's why politicians are so despised, because they're all liars. So I would be okay with that standard, of a standard that they can't lie, and if they do, then they're impeached. It's not really a practical standard, but I would love it if none of our politicians lied and they were all truthful. But that's just not reality, okay? We're human beings. We run campaigns. And so Donald Trump is entitled to his opinion, even though, according to the law, legally, the states all certified it. Mike Pence read it into the Congressional Journal. It's done. The election's over. He's still saying we won this election. We won it by a landslide. So it's off the truth. But is that an incitement of violence specifically? No, I mean, how can you read that statement as an incitement of violence? You can't. The next one, maybe you can make an argument for. If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. So that's really what we're going to latch onto, this fight word. Fight like hell. Fight, fight, fight. The article goes on, thus incited by President Trump, members of the crowd he had addressed in an attempt to, among other objectives, interfere with the joint session's solemn constitutional duty to certify the results. They unlawfully breached, vandalized the Capitol. They injured and killed law enforcement personnel. They menaced members of Congress and congressional personnel and all of those other things. That's all well and good, right? It's actually not well and good. It's all awful and horrendous. But what does that have to do with President Trump? So what you're trying to do here is connect the chain. They have President Trump on one side, whom they despise. They have the Capitol Hill rioters on the other side, who did something horrendous. And what they need to do, so think of those as two links of a chain, they need something to connect the two. They need to come in the middle and say, well, what was it that connected President Trump to some sort of awful behavior from the Capitol Hill rioters? What language, what specific act did he do? And here they're saying it's this language. If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. Okay, we all agree what the Capitol Hill rioters did was awful. Trump over here gave a speech, but did the speech incite, cause the violence? According to their own document, you can read the full thing if you want. I'm not leaving anything out. It says if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. Okay, great. So that's the language. Let's analyze it. Rev.com is a great company. They do a lot of transcription work. So you can just upload a video, you can upload an audio file, and they'll also go through and transcribe public events. So they've done so for the Save America rally that took place on January 6th. You can see here, this was Donald Trump's speech, Save the America rally transcript, January 6th. They do a good job at this stuff. They have quick turnaround time. A little expensive. They just raise their prices, but that's all right. And they made this publicly available, so you can go fact check me on any of this stuff. And what I did this afternoon is I took a quick look at the transcript and I typed in the word fight. Okay, this is what they're so upset about, the word fight. And we'll see here, it is in his speech 23 times, man. So he's talking about fighting a lot. That's a lot of fighting going on, right? He spoke for a long while, and 23 times the word fight came up. So your initial thought is, that's a lot, right? And this is the language they're mad about. If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. That's in their documents. They're indicting him over that language, and he said that word 23 times. So let's take a look and see in what context, right? Context is very important. You can take anything out of context, but he said it 23 times. So he must have been out there just saying, go in there, fight the doors down, fight the Capitol Hill, fight the cops, fight the Congress people, fight Mike Pence, fight Nancy Pelosi, right? Let's take a look. From the transcripts, beginning at 7 minutes and 11 seconds in, the crowd started chanting, fight for Trump, fight for Trump, fight for Trump. All right, well, so that's 3 of those gone. He says, thank you. I'd love to have, if those tens of thousands of people would be allowed, the military, Secret Service, everybody, great, you're doing a great job. Can we come on up here? Is that possible? Can you let them come up here, please? Rudy, you did a great job. He's got guts. You know what? He's got guts, unlike a lot of other people in the Republican Party. He's got guts. He fights. And I'll tell you, thank you very much, John. Fantastic job. That's a tough act to follow, those two, so on and so forth. All right, so he's talking about Rudy Giuliani being a fighter. Rudy being a fighter, not the Capitol Hill rioters. All right, so that's 5 of those are gone. Then he goes on a few minutes later at 12:34. He says, for years, Democrats have gotten away with election fraud and weak Republicans, and that's what they are. There's so many weak Republicans. We have great ones. Jim Jordan, some of these guys, they're out here fighting in the House. Guys are fighting, but it's incredible. Many of the Republicans, I helped them get in. I helped them get elected. I helped Mitch get elected. They're out there fighting the House. Guys are fighting. But it's incredible. Many Republicans, I helped them get in. I helped them get elected. So he's talking about other people once again. Jim Jordan fighting. He's talking about some guy named John who's fighting. Many of the Republicans, Mitch. Okay, so he's talking about the Republicans fighting. He's not saying anything about going and attacking the Capitol building. A minute later at 13:45, he goes on again, the weak Republicans. And that's it. I really believe it. I think I'm going to use the term weak Republicans. You got a lot of them. You got a lot of great ones. You got a lot of weak ones. And they've turned a blind eye as the Democrats enacted policies that chipped away our jobs, weakened our military, and so on. Did you see the other day when Joe Biden said, I want to get rid of America first? What the hell is that about? Get rid of what? How do you talk about that? He says, unbelievable. We have to go through what we have to go through. And you have to get your people to fight. If they don't fight, we have to primary the hell out of the ones that don't fight. You primary them. We're going to let you know who they are. I can already tell you, frankly. You have to get your people to fight. If they don't fight, we have to primary the hell out of the ones that don't fight. So what is he talking about? He's talking about the political candidates. He's saying you have to get your people to fight, your representatives. They've got to go fight. If they don't fight, we got to primary the hell out of them. Within the political confines, within the political realm. He's not saying we have to go execute them if they don't fight like hell. He's saying we got to go primary them. You got to go, and you have to go through the normal democratic process, elect new representatives, primary the ones who aren't asking questions about electoral fraud. Not telling people to go storm the Capitol, but we're not there yet, right? What else does he say about fighting? At 1625, he says, our media is not free. It's not fair. It suppresses thought. It's an understatement. It suppresses speech. It becomes the enemy of the people. It's become the enemy of the people. It's the biggest problem in this country. No third world countries would even attempt to do what you'll hear about in just a few minutes. Republicans are constantly fighting like a boxer with his hands tied behind his back. All right, so he's talking about weak Republicans who are fighting like boxers with their hands tied behind their back. He's not encouraging people to go and storm a Capitol building. He says, it's like a boxer, and we want to be so nice. We want to be so respectful of everybody, including bad people. We're going to have to fight much, much harder, and Mike Pence is going to have to come through for us. If he doesn't, that will be a sad day for our country because you're sworn to uphold the Constitution. Now, it is up to Congress to confront this egregious assault on our democracy, which again is he's saying it's up to Congress to confront this assault, which was taking place on that day. They were counting the electoral votes at the time that I think this speech was going on. It's when they just started the objections, right around the same time that Ted Cruz was just going out there to participate in his constitutional ability to object to the counting of electoral votes. All legal, all within the confines, within the realm of a democratic process. We're going to have to fight much harder. Mike Pence is going to have to come through for us. Same type of just, a political bluster that you hear from any candidate who says, we got to go fight. We got to win. We got to take back the White House. What does that mean? Take back the White House. You can go commandeer it? No, it means we're going to run an election. Donald Trump, so we're going to go primary some people, but we got to fight. It continues at 21:24, so about 5 minutes later. And so we've taken care of things. We've done things like nobody ever thought possible. And that's part of the reason why so many people don't like us, because we've done too much. We've done it too quickly, and we were going to sit home and watch a big victory. And everybody had us down for a victory. It was going to be great. And now we're out here fighting. I said to somebody, I was going to take a few days and relax, but at 10 o'clock, it was over. I was going to take a few days. So he says, again, we're out here fighting. Not saying storming the Capitol, not saying anything quite like that. At 27:57, he says, but it used to be that they'd argue with me. I'd fight. So I'd fight. They'd fight. I'd fight. They'd fight. Boop, boop. What he says. So that's 5 more fights. You'd believe me. You'd believe them. Somebody comes out. They had their point of view, but I had my point of view. But you'd have an argument. Now he's talking here about the corrupt fake news. I'd fight. So I'd fight. They'd fight. I'd fight. They'd fight. Boop, boop. You believe me, you believe them. Somebody comes out, they have their point of view, I had my point of view, but you'd have an argument. Okay, so a fight is an argument. Now what they do is they go silent. It's called suppression. And that's what happens in a communist country. That's what they do. They suppress you. You don't fight with them anymore unless it's they have a little bad story about me. They'll make it 10 times worse in a major headline. But Hunter Biden, we don't talk about him. What happened to Hunter? Where's Hunter? Where is Hunter? They don't talk about him. All right, so fighting is an argument. It's a different context yet again. Gosh, this has to be getting bad somewhere, right? All right, well, I think we got it here. He says, with your help over the last 4 years, we got the greatest political movement in the history of our country. Now we're at an hour and 16 minutes in. There was no other fights in between that, between 27:57 and 1:06. But our fight against the big donors, big media, big tech, and others is just getting started. This is the greatest in history. So a fight against big donors, big media, big tech, not the Capitol building. This is where they get a little bit concerned, and this is where we see the language that is in the document itself. It says, our brightest days are before us. Our greatest achievements still wait. I think one of the greatest achievements will be election security, because nobody, until I came along, had any idea how corrupt our elections were. And again, most people would stand there at 9 in the evening and say, I want to thank you very much. They go off to some other life. But I said, something's wrong here. Something's really wrong. Can't have happened. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. So that's 1 hour and 1 minute and 11 minutes in. This is the end of his speech. He says, our exciting adventures, boldest endeavors have not yet begun. My fellow Americans, for our movement, for our children, for our beloved country, I say this, despite all that's happened, the best is yet to come. So he used fight 20 times. And at the last, they're upset about these 3 remaining fights. And we fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. So previously, the word fight had been used to talk about arguments, it had been used to talk about primaries, it had been used to talk about debates with the media and so on, but they're just capturing that last little bit. If you don't fight like hell, we're not going to have a country anymore. Nothing about storming the Capitol building, nothing about rioting, nothing about sedition, but that's what they're basing their impeachment on, this language, in conjunction with a couple months of him saying this election was stolen and fraudulent. That's it? Really? All right. Well, there must be some other scary words. Okay. I was just looking here for fight. I listened to the whole speech, read it all, but fight was the one that they're latching their teeth in. Well, what about some of these other scary words? A lot of scary words out there, a lot of dangerous words. That's why we have to suppress speech and cancel everybody and kick everybody off every platform, because if they say something that is scary or offensive or potentially violent or something like that, we can't allow that to happen in this world. We got to be very careful, wrap ourselves in bubble wrap so that we don't hurt ourselves as we bump around this world. Well, what other scary words were in the transcript? Let's take a look at a couple of them. How about the word riot? Did Donald Trump ever say we should be rioting? No, 0 times. Search for that word. Didn't happen, not once. Did he say anything about storm, like storm the Capitol? This is an oncoming storm. Oh, it looks stormy today. No, 0 times. What about seize? The word seize? Nope, 0 times. How about coup? Also 0 times. Well, what about kill? Kill came up 3 times. We're going to look at that in a minute. Well, maybe he was saying we're going to go kill some Congress people. Did he say that in there? Maybe. We're going to investigate. Treason, 0. Sedition, seditious, 0 times. Shoot, no. Raid, no. Murder, 0 times. Punch anybody? No. Nothing else in there. Not much scary words, but there is those killing words. Maybe that's something. Let's see here. He does say killing. All right, here it is. He says it 2 times in his speech at 3150. Look, I'm not happy with the Supreme Court. They love to rule against me. I picked 3 people. I fought like hell for them. One in particular, they all said, sir, cut him loose. He's killing us. There's one. The senators, very loyal senators. They're very loyal people. Sir, cut him loose. He's killing us. Sir, cut him loose. He's talking about Kavanaugh. And he said, I must have gotten half of the senators. He said, no, I can't do that to them. It's unfair to the family. He didn't do anything wrong. They're made up stories. He says it again later in this speech. He says, what's interesting? President Obama beat Biden in every state other than the swing states where Biden killed him. Did Biden literally kill President Obama? Oh, no, he's talking about in the context of an election, but the swing states were the ones that mattered. So, no, the killing is not too bad. Is there other dangerous words out there? I don't know. I mean, it seemed pretty normal language to me. So how are they connecting that chain? Capitol Hill rioters over here, Donald Trump's over here. They have a speech where he's talking about fighting. He used it 20 times in the speech in a way that was a normal, rational way to use the word. He said it one time at the end, a little bit out of context, because he wasn't as specifically tying it to some of the other things that he was tying the previous use of the word to. But apparently that word is impeachable. That sentence was impeachable according to them. Did he say anything else? Maybe like at around 18 minutes? Well, let's read this. He says, we've come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. Lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Today, we will see whether Republicans stand strong for the integrity of our elections, but whether or not they stand strong for our country that's been under siege for a long time, far longer than this 4-year period. We've set it on a straighter course, I thought 4 more years. I thought it would be easy. We created 4 more years. I thought it would be easy. We have the greatest economy in the world. We rebuilt the military. We get you the biggest tax cuts. And he goes on and on and on. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Have you seen that on CNN? Did you see that on MSNBC? Did you see that on Twitter? The guy at 18 minutes in calls for peace and that their voices be heard. But he got impeached for that, for this speech, according to their article of impeachment. All right. So, okay. Well, you can be the judge of that. All right. Let's listen and see, or let's look at and see, well, he got impeached, so that's done and over. It's going to go over to the Senate now. What is the Senate going to do? President Trump is out of office in 7 days. Is that right? Yep. 1 week from today, he will not be the president anymore. So they just impeached him with 7 days left. And now it's up to the Senate to decide if they should remove him early because he's causing so much damage in the White House right now, apparently. But this is what Mitch McConnell has been saying. So as a reminder, the way that this works, you get impeached in the House of Representatives, then the trial takes place in the Senate. There are some procedural rules. And so Mitch McConnell, a lot of people have questions about whether or not he's going to, how he's going to vote. He is the Senate Majority Leader currently until I think the two other senators who won from the Democrats in Georgia get certified and get seated. He's still in control of the Senate. And so people want to know, what is he going to do? Is he going to allow the Democrats to open up sort of an emergency session and let some of this stuff in? Or is he going to, postpone it so that it doesn't happen until the 19th or the 20th? Because we still got a week. They still can take up some business if they want to. Well, yesterday there was a scoop by Mike Allen over at Axios, and he said McConnell leans towards convicting Trump. There's a better than 50% chance, according to him, that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell would vote to convict the president in an impeachment trial, sources tell Axios. What they're saying, the Senate institutional loyalists are fomenting a counter-revolution to Trump, said a Republican close to McConnell. This would be one of the most shocking and damning votes in the history of American politics by the most powerful Republican in Congress. McConnell's vote would open the door to the possibility that Trump could be convicted and prohibited from running for president again. So we got to do some analysis on some of this. And here is the rest of the statement. It says an anti-Trump infection is spreading amongst Hill Republicans. House Republican Conference Chair Liz Cheney of Wyoming, the third-ranking House GOP leader and a top establishment voice, announced she will vote to impeach Trump, and she did. She was one of the 10 Republicans who did vote today. Cheney also said to the Capitol mob, quote, there has never been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution. So I'm not real sure what she's talking about because we just ran through the transcripts and I don't know where he said to the mob in there that they should go storm the Capitol. I mean, I don't know. If he did, I'm not sure why the Democrats didn't include that in their article of impeachment. We're just going off their document, right? What are they so upset about? What are they saying is the greatest betrayal by a president, according to their own document, was that fighting word. And he said it 23 times. All 20 of the other ones, I think, had a pretty reasonable explanation. I don't know why he suddenly would have meant that they go storm the Capitol in that final sentence, but that's what they're saying. Apparently, that is the greatest betrayal and oath of his oath to the Constitution. All right. Well, the New York Times says McConnell has told associates that he believes that President Trump committed impeachable offenses and that he is pleased the Democrats are moving to impeach him. McConnell sees this fight as his legacy, defending the Senate and the institution against the verbal attack of the president and the literal attack of his followers. So did Mitch McConnell flip? Is he going to go and impeach President Trump? Well, we don't know yet. And there may be a lot of power in the ambiguity, which I think is what Mitch McConnell is ultimately doing. Some more little tidbits, some more hints are being dropped out. We have Sang-Min Kim, who says news. McConnell's office called Schumer's people today, told them McConnell would not consent to reconvening immediately under the 2004 emergency authorities, a person familiar says. So the Senate won't reconvene Friday or almost certainly before January 19th. Trial would take place in the Biden term. And then, so that came from Sang-Min Kim. And Elena Treen says, can confirm. Mitch McConnell spokesman tells me on the record they declined to an emergency session. No shot. Trial begins Friday. Unlikely it happens before January 19th / the inauguration, which would be the inauguration day. And I did see another headline elsewhere that that Joe Biden and Mitch McConnell actually had a phone call where Joe was asking Mitch if they could do a dual track. So they could do the impeachment proceedings and they could also do the cabinet confirmation proceedings because Joe Biden has to get a lot of his cabinet confirmed through the Senate at the same time. If they can do sort of run parallel paths, have the impeachment trial at the same time they're confirming his cabinet, maybe he would be inclined to do that. Mitch McConnell turned around and said, well, we can talk to the Senate parliamentarian about this and see what they can do to accommodate you, Mr. Biden. And Paul Kane over here says McConnell ends his silence, says, quote, while the press has been full of speculation, I have not made a final decision on how I will vote, and I intend to listen to the legal arguments when they are presented to the Senate. Okay, when they are presented to the Senate. but we don't know when that's going to be. So Mitch McConnell is being very, very ambiguous right now, and I think that is intentional. I think that he probably wants to sort of keep both sides in check for the time being. He probably has a desire one way or the other, but we're not going to know what that is. If he wanted to impeach Trump, he could agree with Senator Schumer, and they could institute that emergency session and just run this thing through and have a vote on it Friday or probably Monday. And so it looks like that's not going to happen. He also could just sort of hang tight, as he's doing right now. If Trump starts getting a little too boisterous for him, then he could say, all right, that's fine. Enough of this already. Sure, we'll have that emergency session on Monday. So by being a little bit ambiguous about it, I think it gives him more options. And we'll see where that goes. Once again, Jack Posobiec, as I said, he's got a lot of good information. He posted here this afternoon that GOP senators leaning towards convicting Donald Trump are the usual suspects, the squishy Republicans, as we've been calling them here: Romney, Collins, Murkowski, Toomey, Barrasso, Thune, and Sullivan. And so they are a little far short of the numbers that they would need. He says Mitch's current plan: get more than 10 Republicans to convict, and then there's no removal. Okay, get 10 to convict. There's no removal because they need 17. These are already known wobblers who might vindictively impeach an ex-president. So they're trying to sort of game out where some of these other Republican senators are going to be. Currently, looks like there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If they can get to 10, it's a good showing that the Senate Republicans are condemning Trump, but it's not enough to ultimately remove him if this is heard prior to his term's expiration. And one of the things that Jack Posobiec was talking about, he said there were 300,000 no non-votes, okay, 300,000 non-votes that were missing in the Georgia runoff, apparently, according to Jack Posobiec. And that is worrying the Senate Republicans. They're saying, wait a minute, 300,000 people didn't show up? That's a problem. Maybe those are Team Trump, and they're pretty upset about what's going on, and maybe they will continue to not show up, or they'll show up or they'll refuse to show up in even greater numbers if they move forward with impeachment. So they got to play out, the Republicans do, their deciphering of what the voters want and then act accordingly. So a couple of McConnell's options. We have, number one, he could authorize an emergency session and vote yes. He could authorize an emergency session and vote no. I don't think that's likely, because why would he authorize it? He'd rather just vote no, or just not hold that emergency session. Or he can just run through the regular course of business, and it looks like that would run out the clock. So even at the very last minute, if they did get a trial, let's say on the 19th, which would be on Tuesday, maybe they don't have enough time to get that done until the inauguration takes place. He then would be out of office on January 20th. And the next question comes up, well, can they still impeach him anyways? Can they impeach a president who's not in office? And my initial instinct was, no. I mean, the remedy for impeachment is removal. That's why you impeach somebody, is to remove them from office. If they're removed from office, what are you impeaching them for? And so some of the counter arguments have been, well, it's so he can't run again. It's so that a lot of his, his pension, his federal benefits, his travel expenditure, his Secret Service protection, whatever benefits an ex-president gets, they're trying to see if they can take that away from him. So that's their argument, that, we're going to impeach him anyways because we want to remove this stuff from him. And they're just angry. They don't like the guy. But I just didn't think that made much sense. And so I was looking around, and I found an article that was posted yesterday by somebody who's probably more qualified, probably a lot more qualified. I don't even have to say probably. Let's say much more qualified to opine on this issue. Wait a minute. Let's see here. Miss Faith sent us something. Let's pause before I talk out of turn. All right. We have a new statement from Mitch McConnell before we move on. Let's see what he has to say. So here he issued a statement Wednesday afternoon. Let's take a look at this. Breaking news from Miss Faith. It says, this comes over from the KBJR6.com. It says, Wednesday, Senate Majority Leader said he wouldn't call an emergency session for a Senate impeachment trial for President Trump. This statement came out Wednesday afternoon. House of Representatives has voted to impeach the president. Senate process will now begin at our first regular meeting following receipt of the article from the House. Given the rules and procedures and Senate precedents that govern presidential impeachment trials, there is simply no chance that a fair or serious trial could conclude before President-elect Biden is sworn in next week. The Senate has held 3 presidential impeachment trials. They have lasted 83 days, 37 days, and 21 days, respectively. Even if the Senate were to begin this week and move promptly, no final verdict would be reached until after President Trump had left office. This is not a decision I am making. It is a fact. The president-elect himself stated last week that his inauguration on January 20th is the quickest path for any change in the occupant of the presidency. In light of this reality, I believe it will best serve our nation if Congress and the executive branch spend the next 7 days completely focused on facilitating a safe inauguration and an orderly transfer of power to the incoming Biden administration. I am grateful to the offices and institutions within the Capitol that are working around the clock alongside federal and local law enforcement to prepare for a safe and successful inauguration at the Capitol next Wednesday. All right, well, there you have it. So we can put some of that speculation to bed. Sounds like Mitch McConnell is not going to be taking this thing up anytime soon. And even if they did, by the time it was concluded, I didn't know that, 83 days for one of the last Senate impeachment trials, 37 days for another one, and 21 days respectively for different impeachment trials. So there's just no way that this is going to get done prior to Joe Biden taking office. And so as we were just transitioning, the next question is, can they impeach him after the fact? Can they still impeach President Trump, even though he's not in office anymore? And so I was explaining before that breaking news. Thank you, Miss Faith. You're the best. She says, this article says, this came from J. Michael Luddig, who used to be a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit from 1991 to 2006. So this guy has been practicing law for a very long time. It was on the federal circuit for the Fourth Circuit. Big, massive circuit. Big, massive position. So I would take his legal analysis for a lot, right? It's probably on point. He says his opinion over in the Washington Post that once Trump leaves office, the impeachment Senate can't hold an impeachment trial. He goes on. He says the sequencing of the House impeachment proceedings before Trump's departure from office and the inauguration of a new president followed by a Senate impeachment trial perhaps months later raises the question of whether a former president can be impeached after he leaves office. The Constitution itself answers this question clearly. No, he cannot be. Once Trump term ends on January 20th, Congress loses its constitutional authority to continue impeachment proceedings against him, even if the House has already approved articles of impeachment. Therefore, if the House of Representatives were to impeach the president before he leaves office, the Senate could not thereafter convict the former president and disqualify him under the Constitution from future public office. The reason for this is found in the Constitution itself. Trump would no longer be incumbent in the office of the president at the time of the delayed Senate proceedings. It would no longer be subject to impeachment conviction by the Senate under the Constitution's impeachment clauses, which is to say that the Senate's only power under the Constitution is to convict or not an incumbent president. So if you're not an incumbent president, you fall outside of the purview of the impeachment clause and you are no longer allowed to do that, right? They could still charge him with other crimes or do whatever they want to do, but couldn't impeach him. And they reference Article 1, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution. Let's read it. Judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit, but the party convicted shall nevertheless be liable to subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to the law. So no further than removal from office. So if you read that, removal from office shall not extend further than to removal from office. So what is an impeachment good for if somebody's already out of the office? Now, if you read the rest of that article and some of the other bloggers out there, I think I originally saw this from Ed Morrissey over at hotair.com. He did a good analysis on this where he was saying that, yeah, I mean, this has happened before a couple times. I think there were 2 times where early in the country's history, the 1700s, early 1800s, or maybe mid 1800s, maybe it was around the Civil War time. There were 2 other instances where impeachments were sort of moving forward after somebody was out of office. I think in one case, one of them was dismissed. In another case, somebody had transitioned. They're not exactly on point. You know, it's not this type of scenario. And I think in the second case, that person had resigned sort of in lieu of being impeached. And so the argument was, well, their tenure still was moving forward and the impeachment was necessary to make sure that they couldn't come back in and sort of fill out the rest of their tenure. But they're just not on point. And I think that that this U.S. Court of Appeals judge obviously has a lot more experience than I do. And my reading of his interpretation, I think, is that he's on point. So I think As I've been saying, I think this whole thing is political. Right now, you have a lot of people hyperventilating in the media. A lot of people are trying to, the Democrats and anybody who's sort of a non-Republican or a non-conservative or a non-Trumpist, they're sort of in hiding at the moment. Everybody else is full of bravado. They're like Jack on the Titanic. I'm king of the world. Everything's good. The sail is at their wind. The wind is at their sails. They're having a good time, and they're trying to score some political points and then, rally this and use this as good momentum, I think, into the Biden administration. Whether this stuff actually goes anywhere, I think, is unlikely. So a lot more political show. Trump's going to be, he's a historical president at this point. Got 2 impeachments. See if he gets convicted. I highly doubt it. All right, so let's talk more about some criminal law that's taking place in this whole endeavor. So I want to talk about this guy by the name of Cleveland Grover Meredith Jr. He's a Capitol Hill rioter, somebody who was around the vicinity. Let's say Capitol Hill rioter. I'll leave that for you to decide. You can decide whether or not he was. But we're going to break down sort of what the media was reporting. Then we'll go through a statement from the U.S. attorney who is in charge of this case. And now here's the context here. Cleveland Grover Meredith is currently being charged with some crime. I'll tell you what those crimes are when we get through it. We're going to do some analysis, look at some of the facts, and go through the document. But he's been charged with a crime, and now he's in custody. And so anytime somebody's charged with a crime, one of the first things that the court does is they try to decide what to do with you. Should we let you out of custody? Should we keep you in custody? Should we let you out of custody with some conditions, like giving you an ankle monitor, making you report to a pretrial services bureau, and somebody to talk to make sure you're doing what you should be doing? Should we give you some sort of alcohol testing or drug testing? There's a lot of things that they can do to let a person out of custody so that they can continue to live their lives. Remember, you're still innocent until proven guilty. Just because you're charged with a crime doesn't mean you're convicted of the crime. Cases can last months, 6 months, 9 months, 2 years. Some of them last longer than that. And so the court needs to decide, well, what should we do with you? I mean, should we keep you in custody this whole time, or should we, make you post a bond, $25,000 bond, just to ensure you come back and you're a part of the court proceedings? And it's a big question. And so that's what's happening here. Cleveland Grover Meredith was arrested as a result of these Capitol Hill riots, and he's trying to get out of custody. And so the U.S. Attorney's Office filed a motion that we're about to go through, asking that the court maintain him on pretrial detention. So in other words, they're saying, we got to hold this guy for the foreseeable future. And then we're going to go through their arguments, and then you can be the judge of this. Now, as one reminder, as we go through this, I am a criminal defense attorney, so some of my biases are going to be in favor of releasing this guy. I'm a strong believer in the concept of freedom, innocent until proven guilty. This guy has not been proven innocent. And some of these facts, as a little bit of a content warning, are disturbing. Okay, there's text messages that take place here. There are a lot of sort of fiery words that are being used, some profanity, the C words, I think, in here. So just brace yourself for some of this. But this is what goes on in the world, and this is a good, I think, insight into how criminal law works specifically, and we want to talk about it. So you may have heard of this guy. A lot of headlines surrounding around this story. This was from the New York Times, posted a couple days ago. Man with assault rifle charged with threatening Pelosi, officials say. The Department of Justice said on Friday that Cleveland Grover Meredith Jr. was one of 13 people who had been charged in federal court after a violent pro-Trump mob stormed the Capitol. We have another one this was from a local news site, I think, over in Colorado. Officials, man who traveled from Colorado to D.C. with assault rifle charged with threatening Pelosi. He's among several people charged in Wednesday's mayhem that left 5 dead. Speaker of the House Pelosi speaks at the House chamber at the Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. This was by Robert Garrison. And so, it's been floating around, and there's been a lot of these types of stories with people doing bad things, and they're getting sort of wrapped up into this Capitol Hill investigation. This is the government's memo, their memorandum in support of pretrial detention. This is this guy, Cleveland Grover Meredith Jr. Looks like he might be out golfing. Maybe those are his parents. Looks like a normal guy you'd see sort of at the grocery store or whatever. And they want to hold him in custody. So rather than me sort of dictate my opinion on this, let's go through this, argue both sides, and I'd be very curious to see what some of you have to think about it. All right, so let's go through it. The United States of America, by and through its attorney, the U.S. Attorney of the District of Columbia, they submit this memorandum. The government requests the following points and authorities, and they want a determination regarding pre-trial detention. They want the court to consider all of this stuff. And I'm not going to go through the whole document. I think it's like 14 pages or something. And so I'm clipping out stuff that I think are the highlights, but we have the main bullet points. Number 1, subsection A, the defendant arrived in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021 with an assault-style rifle, a Glock firearm with high-capacity magazines, and over 2,500 rounds of ammunition. And so they go through in this document and they detail what he has. He's got a number of different magazines. These look like some extended round magazines. He's got a lot of ammunition. Looks like some name tags or some cards. He's got an ammo bag. He's got a target practice shooting thing. Looks like it has some shots in it. He's got some other little things. Maybe these are lighters. I can't tell what they are. You see some 2 firearms on the left, government's exhibit number 1. You see an American flag painted Glock. Looks nice. We have another, I don't know what that is, but looks like a nice weapon with a scope on it. And so that's the first point, right? Very dangerous stuff. He had firearms with him. So the government is saying he's pretty dangerous. They're going to go through and they're going to compare that, right? Now, guns by itself is just, even if you're an anti-gun person, I'm not. If you are, you might say, oh, that's pretty dangerous, right? You could do a lot of damage with that stuff. And there's no question about it. You could do a ton of damage with 2,500 rounds and 2 firearms with extended magazines. It's dangerous. But in and of itself, is it illegal? On January 6th, while en route to Washington, D.C., so January 6th is the day that we're talking about. This is when Capitol Hill riots took place. The defendant received a text that stated, in part, Trump supporters have violated several layers of security fending at the Capitol building in Washington, prompting clashes with riot police. The defendant responded to this text, burn D.C. to the effing ground. Shortly later, he received another text. It's on, people in the White House. So somebody sent him that. Later, the defendant sent a text stating 3.5 hours away from fun. You see this capitalized down here? Fun. 3.5 hours away from fun. All right, so that's curious, right? He's 3.5 hours away traveling from Colorado. They're saying people are in the White House, which didn't happen, but maybe they meant the Capitol building, whatever. All right, so this started happening around 1:15 or whenever that was. He's 3.5 hours away. By the time you got there, wasn't it mostly over in 3.5 hours? It was like a couple hours. They started they got everybody cleared out. They swept the building. The Congress people were in by about 8 p.m. and they started counting the votes again. So my timeline could be wrong on that. Fact check me if you want, but it's roughly that. So this guy's 3.5 hours away. The riots have already started. All right. So it goes on. The government is going on. They say at the same time, the defendant received a text that stated Pence blew it. Okay, so that must have been when Arizona was counted and Mike Pence just accepted Arizona's electoral votes. The responded to this text stating wartime. All right. He must still in his car driving on over. Later, the defendant received text describing the incident that occurred at the Capitol. The defendant responded to these texts saying, ready to remove several craniums from shoulders. Okay, that means he's ready to take some people's heads off their shoulders. Shortly afterwards, the defendant sent a text saying, I'm so ready to FK some traitors up. All right. So he's pretty fiery. On the same date, the defendant sent a text that stated, I'm going to collect a S-ton of traitors' heads. Later, the defendant sent a text stating, hauling ass 3.5 hours from target practice. All right, so he's still 3.5 hours away. Don't know what the timeline looks like here because the government didn't give us any information, but he's still 3.5 hours from the target. He said, it ain't just me. Someone has to take the trash out. F these MFers. All right, so we've got firearms. We've got some angry language. He's still 3.5 hours away. Was 3.5 hours away a while ago. Still 3.5 hours away. All right. What else do we have? Paragraph B. Between January 4th and January 7th, the defendant transmitted numerous communications to several individuals in which he threatened to commit violence in D.C. All right. So he was talking about it well before January 6th. So January 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, several bad text messages. Prior to and after arriving in D.C., the defendant made numerous threatening communications. These texts were recovered from the defendant's cell phone. They were exchanged with several individuals. In an interview conducted at the time of his arrest, the defendant admitted that he sent the text messages obtained on his cell phone. Texts of a particular concern include the following in chronological order. Okay, so I think I reversed these slides. So I should have talked about these text messages under subsection B. You can see it's basically those text messages that we just went through. So that's what they're saying. From January 4th to January 7th, that's when he sent these texts. I'm ready to F some traitors up, ready to take the trash out on these MFers, burn DC to the effing ground. Those were all done between January 4th and January 7th, chronologically. Paragraph C, the defendant committed an assault in Washington, D.C. shortly after his arrival on January 7th. Wait a minute. What? January 7th? That was all done and over. Joe Biden was president at that point in time. Hadn't taken the White House yet, but he was confirmed by Congress, and that was the end of the game. So what the heck are we talking about? Well, on January 7th, the defendant assaulted a person in Washington, D.C. Okay, so according to an affidavit submitted by the Superior Court of the District of Columbia in support of a search warrant, the defendant exited his vehicle, head-butted the complainant, so whoever the person was, knocked him to the ground, and assaulted him on the ground. The defendant then fled in his vehicle. Okay, so this guy was not even part of the Capitol Hill riots. He didn't even get arrested for that at all. I mean, he was there after the fact. Don't know when he got into D.C., but he didn't even get arrested for any of that stuff. He got arrested the next day. Don't know what time because they didn't tell us. Was it the next morning? Was it the next evening? For getting into an altercation with somebody outside of his hotel room. And he didn't shoot them. Okay? He had 2 weapons and he had 2,500 rounds of ammunition and didn't shoot him. Okay. So he just got into an argument. Probably somebody said, "Your MAGA hat's stupid." And he said, "You're stupid." And the whole thing went down. Okay? It's a misdemeanor level assault. That's why this is taking place out of the DC Superior Court. Okay, it's probably a felony court or a misdemeanor court out in DC. I don't practice in DC, so I don't know specifically, but it's going to be a misdemeanor offense. This is taking place in federal court. Federal court doesn't care about, misdemeanor level assaults. But he didn't shoot him. He had the weapons, he had the ammunition, didn't shoot him. Now, if this were a fact pattern in a law school exam, this is where you make your money. This is where you start to have diverging opinions on this pretty clearly. It says, by his own admission, the defendant is a habitual user of marijuana, which, by the way, is still illegal federally, and has a history of mental illness. So now that opens up a whole different can of worms. It kind of takes you out of the regular criminal channel, and you can start talking about mental competency. You can have psychiatric evaluations, and it's a whole different sort of tangent. So when we're talking about whether to release this guy, that is a whole separate can of worms, right? Let's go on and talk about the background. The defendant has been charged by complaint in the U.S. District Court for interstate communication of threats. Interstate, that's what he was charged with. Wasn't even there at the Capitol riots. No Capitol riot charges, no remaining on government property, no interfering with government operations, no illegal trespass, none of that stuff. Text messages. He's being charged with text messages. In violation of the U.S. Code, he is charged in D.C. Superior Court with the lower level offenses, okay? Assault and battery or whatever these sub charges are. It's going to be probably one of those two things or both, or disorderly conduct or something like that. No conditions or combination of conditions can ensure the community's safety in his return to this jurisdiction for future court proceedings. As such, he should be held pending trial. Let's round out the government's argument. Here is what they're saying. The defendant is charged by complaint with interstate communication of threats. The nature are set forth above. The first factor, the nature of the circumstances, clearly weigh in favor of detention. Here, the defendant communicated numerous threats to commit acts of violence in D.C. As set forth by the complaint, the defendant threatened, among other things, to kill the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. And if you read this, it's actually a pretty interesting full document. And we have the link here in the slides. Evidence further shows the defendant threatened to kill the mayor of Washington. So a lot of threats. At the time he made these threats, he had the means to carry them out. Specifically, he was in possession of 2 firearms, one with the telescopic sight, high-capacity magazines, 1,000 rounds, various calibers, armor-piercing rounds. Finally, after in D.C., the defendant engaged in an act of violence by assaulting a pedestrian, unprovoked, and then fleeing his vehicle. Given these facts and circumstances, the defendant should remain detained, and it is signed off by this guy, Ahmed Bassett, who is the assistant U.S. attorney. The government wants him to be detained without bond pending the resolution of his case. So they want to keep him in custody. And what do you think about that? What do you think? This started out as this guy was part of the Capitol Hill mob, assaulting this with an assault rifle. Those were the headlines. I didn't say that specifically. If you go back and you read them carefully, you'll see that they don't really say that. But they do say that he was part of that pro-Trump mob. He was part of the Capitol Hill madness. But we don't even know if he got there that day. He may have been there the day afterwards. Or he showed up late and just went right to his hotel room. If you read the full document, he does say, well, I'm in the hotel room. There are still patriots down in the lobby, just hanging out, right? Just kind of partying. Got into a fight with somebody. They charged him with a couple misdemeanors. Now they're charging him with bad text messages because he had firearms. Be very curious to see what all of you think about it. I think you know where I might stand on this. Now, the rub in this is the mental illness, okay? If the mental illness thing is legitimate, then yeah, at that point in time, you got to be very careful about that. And the way that this process normally works, at least here in Arizona, is you go through competency hearings. So you would actually bring this individual in front of 3 different psychiatrists, or it would start with 2. They would see 1. They would determine their competency. They would determine their danger. So the prosecutors, the courts have sort of a list of approved psychiatrists who do this type of work. So you'd send them to one. You'd send them to another one. If they agree as to the conclusion, if they say that this person is competent, then that's it. If they say he's incompetent, then that's it. But if they split, one says competent, one says incompetent, then you go find a 3rd psychiatrist, and then you can even have, extended hearings about all of this. Challenge both of them, their conclusions, all 3 of them. And it can turn into a whole can of worms because now we're talking about, innocent until proven guilty. We're talking about due process. You want to make sure that a person knows what's happening to them and that they're competent to understand these things. But they're not asking for that. They're just asking to keep him in custody without bond. Got a little bit of an issue with that. When you keep somebody in custody, this case could take a long time or it could be closed immediately. When you have somebody who's in custody as their case is pending, they're very inclined to get out of custody. We see this all the time. Prosecutors do this all over the country. They sort of bully people into taking plea deals because they can't get out of custody. Okay, if you're sitting in custody for 6 months and a prosecutor says, look, this case could go on for, or it doesn't have to be 6 months. You could be sitting in custody for 48 hours, let's say 24 hours. A prosecutor comes into you, you're sitting in your cell, and you say, he says, do you have an attorney? You say, no. He goes, oh, do you want one? You want to get one? Public defender or whatever. You say, I waive my right to be represented. All right, sign these forms. Here you go. And they say, all right, well, here's the plea deal. And if you sign this, we're not going to be asking for any probation, or we'll ask for probation, maybe a small fine, maybe some mental health classes, something like that. But we're going to let you out of custody. You just have to plead guilty. It's got a sign right here, plead guilty. We'll let you out of this thing. And you go, okay, but I'm not guilty. Like, I wasn't going to kill Nancy. I wasn't going to kill the mayor. Like, I'm part of this group text. Like, we thought the FBI was listening. We were just joking around. I didn't shoot anybody, right? It's America, right? We can have firearms. I don't know what the DC rules on firearms are. There may be some other problems with that, but you get my drift, right? The underlying threat here of wiping out our government officials was just bloviation. It was just braggadocious talk, right? They were all just sort of, meandering around, doing whatever they're doing as the patriots. Okay. So is that enough to keep somebody in custody? And does it give the government a little bit of undue burden or duress? In other words, they can come into you and say, I'll let you out of custody, but you got to plead guilty. If you don't plead guilty immediately, well, you're going to sit in custody. We're going to ask for no bond, and you're going to have to sit here pending the outcome of your case. What would you do in that situation? You just say, whatever, fine. I get out right now. I get to get out of this hellhole. Yes, please. And you just sign the document. You have a conviction. Happens all the time, all over the country. So this is a little bit of a fun one. Be curious to see what some of you have to say about it. All right. Yesterday, we talked about Lisa Montgomery. We were saying, wow, this was kind of a last minute halting of the death penalty. Lisa Montgomery was the woman who, awful situation in 2004. She went and found another pregnant woman, killed her, took her 8-month-old fetus, a baby that had not even been born yet, out of her stomach, and the woman died. She kept the baby. She wanted to raise it as her own, and then she's been on trial and on death row for a very long time. Donald Trump and his administration, they authorized the death penalty again, much to my chagrin, my dismay. I do not like the death penalty. I talked about that yesterday, but it was an interesting case. So she was scheduled to be executed last night. At the last minute, there was a court of appeals that came out and halted the death penalty proceedings because what her defense attorneys are saying is that she is incompetent. She doesn't know what is going on, sort of like what we just talked about with Cleveland. She doesn't know any of this stuff, and so they were asking for more time to investigate this a little bit further. Well, even though we have been following the Supreme Court for months and we've known how slowly they can move, they sort of don't like to get involved in any election litigation. They're pretty slow to tell us whether they're going to grant certiorari or not. They moved rapidly last night. This story came over from the New York Times. U.S. executes Lisa Montgomery for 2004 murder. First woman to be put to death by the federal government since 1953. The only woman on federal death row. She was early Wednesday morning executed. First woman in nearly 70 years, sentenced to death in 2004 for murdering a woman, abducting her unborn child. Miss Montgomery supporters argued that a history of trauma and sexual abuse that marred her life contributed to the circumstances that led to her crime. Her case, unusual in part because so few women are sentenced to death, ignited debate over the role of the offender's past trauma in criminal sentencing. During a series of court orders that briefly blocked her execution, she was pronounced dead at 1:31 a.m. at the federal prison complex in Terre Haute, Indiana. Bureau of Prisons said in a statement, her death by lethal injection is the 11th execution since the Trump administration resumed the use of federal capital punishment in July after a 17-year hiatus. So disappointing. I agree with a lot of this. What she did was horrendous, awful and horrendous. I don't know how the world is better off now that she's dead. Don't know that she got a fair shake. I didn't represent her on this case. I don't know that they were able to get to the bottom of her past trauma and her mental incompetencies, but doesn't matter anymore because she's dead. And the Supreme Court acted very quickly on this. Let's take a look at the Supreme Court orders, and we'll see here the application for stay. So there was a stay that was presented to the chief and referred to him by the court is granted. And the order here from the U.S. District Court is granting a stay is vacated. So what they did is they just took that lower level court that get granted a hold on the execution. They say, nope, that's vacated. So they took the appeal from the government and they got rid of the lower court's stay. The lower court said, we're going to pause the execution. The Supreme Court said nope, and they pressed the play button, and the execution happened. Order in the pending case. There was I think 4 different cases that were working their way up, and the application for stay of the execution was denied. So you see here, all of the conservative judges were on board. Looks like all 6 of them were. Only the liberals were dissenting. Breyer, Sotomayor, Justice Kagan. Same over here, Breyer, Sotomayor, Justice Kagan. All would have granted the application. And so on some other criminal justice issues, some of the rare occasions where I do agree with the liberal wing of the court, I think that, as I said yesterday, the death penalty stuff is going to be looked back on when we evolve as a species 20 years from now. We'll look back on some of this stuff and we'll have horror about, I think, what we were doing to people because we'll know more about what really makes people tick. At least I'm hopeful anyways. All right. So now that we're talking about, we just wrapped up some of, a little depressing, little down, little sour stuff going on with, running over Nancy Pelosi, bringing weapons, impeaching the president. Some people may be overjoyed about that. I'm not particularly happy that we wasted more time on something that's not going to result in anything, but that's what the government does. They're very good at it. And so that is what they do. Well, we've got a lot of, it's been kind of a dreary start to 2021. I saw this clip on Twitter yesterday, late last night, and this was a mother's reaction to seeing her son pass the bar exam. So for those of you who don't know, when you go to law school, you go for 2.5, 3 years. It's a grueling experience, a lot of work. I've never read so much stuff in my life. It was insane, but you get it done. But that's not it. You got to go sit for a bar exam. And a bar exam is in Arizona. I took it here and passed. It was a 2-day exam. I also took it in California and passed. It was a 3-day exam. It's a lot, right? And you typically will spend 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes 8 weeks studying all day, 8, 9, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, leading up to the final week before you take this bar exam, something like 10, 12 hours a day. And I remember, I'm going to play you a clip from a young man and his mom who is sitting behind him, and they're checking the results on his laptop. And I remember this experience so vividly. Twice. I did it twice. I passed Arizona and California, and I remember this clear as day. Unfortunately, I didn't have my mom behind me. I was so sort of nervous and petrified that I was like, I wanted to be alone in a private. I turned my phone off. Nobody call me. I'm going to check these results. And fortunately, they came back well for me. But I was watching this last night, and I just thought this was one of those feel-good videos that I wanted to share with you. We talk a lot about legal stuff, a lot of depressing things. This was a fun one. So here is this from a guy named Rex Chapman over on Twitter. Yes.
Hallelujah, 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 glory, hallelujah. Lord, you're faithful.
Yep. I remember that. It was a good feeling, was a good day. And so congratulations to that young man. We're happy to have you on the bar, and we're grateful that you passed and that you have a loving family who's there celebrating that with you. How fun. What a good feeling. So congratulations to him. All right, so let's take a look at some of these super chats that have been coming in. They're coming in hot. All right, this is from Sharon. What's up, Sharon? Starting us off. Says January 20th, President Trump will be a private citizen. Professor Dershowitz says a private citizen can't be impeached. Then there's Belknap in 1876. What's going on? So I think Belknap was one of those where it's not entirely on point. One of those, there were two situations. One, I think, was somebody resigned early. And then the other one was, I can't remember what it was. There are, I think, two distinguishing cases there. This is subject to, I think, interpretation. It's subject to debate. I don't know that it's actually happened in this manner before. So what you do when you're analyzing law is it's a complicated process, really. But what you're trying to do is sort of compare apples and oranges. You've got one house that's built. It's got a red front door. You've got another house that has a blue front door, and you're trying to see, which ones are better for me, which ones work. You're picking out houses and different features, and you're trying to comparing and contrasting cases to see which ones fit your argument and which ones don't. So you can find, I think, good case law that supports the fact that the president can't be impeached after he leaves office. You find stuff that say that maybe you can make an argument for it, but I look to people who have more authority in this space than I do, and I think that a retired circuit court judge for the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals out of the Fourth Circuit is somebody who's pretty credible. He says it doesn't look good for those who wanted to continue the impeachment proceeding after he leaves office, and I would concur with that. I think it just makes sense. The remedy for impeachment is removal. If there's no remedy, how can you remove somebody? Or how can you impeach somebody if you can't meet the remedy? Kind of like the same argument you saw in the election litigation, right? A lot of the courts said, hey, we can't grant you relief, so because the states have already certified the election, so we can't grant relief. Your complaint is moot. Donald Trump wants to sue over the election, but nothing can be done about it, so they just dismiss the claim. Kind of the same concept here, right? They want to impeach the president so that they can remove him from office. He's already out of office. Why are they impeaching him? We have Sajid Takahari. Anyone watch Trump's new message on the White House YouTube? By the way, it is physically impossible for someone to have heard Trump and go riot. Two separate events. Yeah, and I think that as the breakdown is happening, as more and more detail is coming out about the timing of the event, when the first breach took place at the Capitol, I think it was still when Trump was speaking. And so if they're going to claim that last sentence, the one that we just played in the transcript, was at the very end of his speech, if they're saying in their impeachment document that is what caused the incitement of the insurrection, then how is that physically possible if they were already breaching the building before he even muttered those words? The timeline is not matching. So I would agree with you, Saji. It's an entirely separate and distinct thing in my mind thus far. We have Henry Bolano says Trump is a sitting president, can still appoint a special prosecutor for both Hunter Biden and the U.S. election. He has that constitutional power. Yeah, and I'm not sure if he can or will, or what the Department of Justice is going to deal with that. I'm not sure that anything's going to happen. Remember, this all has already been done before, right? There was a special prosecutor appointed for the fake Russian collusion investigation, that was all based on a bunch of fraudulent nonsense and a call that was perfectly legitimate. That was done by Obama on their way out to hamstring the Trump administration. Is Trump going to do that to Biden? I think he'd be well within his right to do so. Good to see you there, Henry. We have Sabo Abbas says, how do we get term limits for Congress? I think that has to be done through a constitutional amendment because the terms are set in the Constitution. So that is a big process. You'd have to have 2/3. You'd have to pass a bill that passes that imposes the term limits, and then both houses of Congress would have to pass that, I think, by 2/3 majority, and then it would have to go to the states that would have to ratify it by, I think, 3/4 of the states have to ratify that. I think the other way you could do it is by calling a constitutional convention, and you could bypass Congress, just have a convention of the states and do it that way as well. But I haven't looked into that too deeply, so take that with a grain of salt. Map maker Jenny says incitement of insurrection. Do you think this is something that Kamala Harris can be charged for as well? How can we legally hold them equally responsible? Good question, map maker. So remember, impeachment is sort of a political court. Okay, you can have civil court, like for traffic tickets. You can have family court or juvenile court for young people. You can have a drug court for drug addicts. You can have, felony court for serious offenses. You can have civil court for civil lawsuits, criminal court, and all these different courts. The impeachment is sort of a unique thing because it is a court of politics, right? We just ran through the document that they had to submit, and it was weak as hell. There was nothing in there. They're talking about, fight at the end of his speech, where we just went through the other document. If that document were submitted in a felony court of law, it would just be laughed right out of there, right? There's nothing in there. It's just it's a political document. So you have to understand that's the standard. And so if that standard, which is so low, is permissible, yeah, you could absolutely, I think, impeach Kamala Harris for it. And we've talked about it. We talked about some of her statements during the BLM protests. She even herself said specifically on her Twitter account that she wanted to raise money to help bail people out. So she's okay with some protests and some criminality. In fact, cops and other people have arrested protesters, and she was promoting bailing them out. And so, if those people were the ones who were throwing Molotov cocktails at court buildings or federal buildings or in Minneapolis, burning down police stations, right? I mean, it's the same standard. It would be the same standard. So I would think absolutely you can hold them accountable to it. But is anybody going to do it? No. Because they have a different toolbox. They can use the media to protect them and sort of escape a lot of liability because they're in their protective bubble. Good question, though. Zara PhD says, walkout planned, pro free speech. Don't use Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Pinterest, Reddit, TikTok, Snapchat. Don't buy Amazon, Apple, Google 1 week from January 15th to January 21st. So, yeah, there you go. Just speak with your wallet, right? I think Twitter are they still getting killed on the stock market? I don't know. But yeah, there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of Trump supporters, a lot of people who are upset about what's been going on. And one way to take action is just to not support their companies. Hit them where it hurts in the pocketbook. Saji Takahara says, why should you have the Capitol be your most secure place in America? Why not your homes? Why are you trying to protect the government that neglects us? So what I'm saying is because of all of the sort of the powerful people there, you would imagine that they would be protecting themselves, that their building that houses 100 senators, 435 Congress people, all of their support staff, they don't live and work there. They convene there. They have their own Senate and House offices. But the point is, if they're all there, the vice president is there, you would imagine that when they're convening for a very special purpose to count the electoral votes, that they would be ultimately secured, that everything would be in place so that you don't have a bomb go off and wipe out, 2.5 branches of government or a full branch and a half of the executive branch with the vice president. It would be a big problem. You would just imagine that our security apparatus would be in full force, and they weren't. I certainly think that you should protect your homes. I'm not saying that, right? But do you get Secret Service protection at your home? No. Do you have the Capitol Hill Police? No. Do you have National Guard? No. federal government should for that reason. Lava Java Lava sending us some Java. Thanks, Lava. We have another one from Chris Wolney. Says the security posture at the Capitol last week is seriously dubious given what they knew. We need to hear the testimony of senior Capitol Police. I agree completely with that, Chris. I would love to see hearings on this across the board. I would like to know what happened and when. A very detailed breakdown of, and it's still early, right? The FBI is going hard on this. And we played a little bit of that clip from their press briefing yesterday. They're going to be investigating this thing for months. And so I would like to see, congressional hearings. I would like to see some intensive sort of hearings about what happened, because I think that this was a catastrophic problem, something that in my mind seems a little bit more than just casual negligence, but I could just be speculating. Turd Ferguson says 2020 riots are the language of the unheard. Walls are racist. Defund the police. 2021 riots are seditious and insurrection. Fortress DC, we need more popo. National Guard and the Army for our safety. Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, think about that dichotomy there. You've got the politicians who are going to just as we just played, the National Guard, hundreds of soldiers, I think 20,000, 14,000 National Guard, a massive show of force to protect them. But if it's your cities, if it's right here down on Scottsdale Fashion Square at a mall down here, when they were sort of rampaging through the mall, we don't know what the Scottsdale police were doing. I don't know if they were being aggressive. I don't think that they were. A couple people got charged after the fact, but they just sort of let them just run wild because it's a political thing. It's all political. One issue serves them to condemn, in this case, the Capitol Hill riots and the Trump people. On the other one, it's support. They support that. It's their extremist group, and if it's theirs, they're okay with it. Massive hypocrisy. Good to see you, Turd. Lava Java says, will those whom voted against the impeachment be forced to resign due to sedition? I know, it's a good question. I'm sure you're going to have a Democrat who says that, right? It's a funny question. Yeah, if you vote against the ultimate one-party system, well, that is sedition, right? Isn't it? If you don't get in lockstep, if you don't just sit down and vote however Nancy Pelosi tells you to vote, well, you're supporting Donald Trump, and that means you are a seditious traitor. So we'll see if they want to expel 197 Republicans. Kevin Schroeder says, could an individual county or town declare themselves a sanctuary county town that will not enforce unconstitutional, radical federal executive orders? So, it's a very interesting idea. And I actually have a friend in Arizona who was thinking about doing that, literally thinking about doing that. And he was telling me this story. He was looking into, essentially buying a municipality and spent, he was ballparking the numbers, but I think it would cost like $2 million to do this. Buy some land, get it zoned the right way, get the appropriate, approval, and sort of create your own little island of your own town and do it all legally. And in that way, then you could sort of, create your own mini government. And, I obviously have not thought through this very much, but there are people talking about it. So it would be curious to see if anybody can figure out how that framework would work. And he was sort of playing around with the idea as well, and I don't think it ever went anywhere. Good question. Be curious about that. And I think there's a free state project or something like that that's taking place in New Hampshire. A different commenter mentioned it, but I never looked into it. But I'd be curious as to what some of those solutions would look like. We got Beth Coddington in the house. Good evening, Robert and friends. I just emailed you the link of the interview I was talking about yesterday. Confession, he is my other favorite nightly stream, but you are tied, so no worries. Thanks, Beth. So I'm not sure that I watched that interview yet. Oh, I think I started it, but I didn't finish it. That was the one from the Epic Times, I believe. And I just subscribed to his channel. And I think, what I saw, I watched it for about 2 minutes and I got distracted doing something else. But that's good to know. Beth, as long as we're equal, I'll take it. Good to see you. We have Jamie Boyd says, cool. Thanks for the support, Jamie. Another one from Sergeant OQ. Why aren't the Repubs playing the same games as the Dems? Calling out the hypocrisy has proven 100% ineffective. Articles need to be drafted against Pelosi for her coup attempt. Right? Because the Republicans are so spineless. They hate Donald Trump as much as the Democrats do. So they just don't care. If Donald Trump is out of office, they're all going to go back to the good old boys club where, it's one party just ransacks the treasury for 4 years. Then it goes to the other party for 8. Then it goes back to the other party for another 8. And so, now it's the Democrats' turn. And the Republicans are going to play that very friendly, loyal opposition. You know, we care and all this crap as they continue to just milk the American people out of their money, ram through $2.4 trillion omnibus spending bills with 2.5 hours notice, and give the American people back $600. $600 for shutting you down, forcing you to forego a significant part of your income, your business, your livelihood. $600. Thank you, Republicans. Thank you, Congress. And so that's why. I mean, they're totally weak. I think the Republican Party is basically dead, honestly, truthfully. And I say that as somebody who used to be pretty sympathetic to the Republicans, not in recent years, though. Seiji Takahara says, they are turncoats on truth and rationality. Trump is just a person. Would be nice if you Americans stop stereotyping each other. Trees in the forest. Yeah, but we love stereotyping. I mean, do you see how this country is going? Everybody's just segregating themselves into even more narrow classes, right? You have all the different alphabet letters of, that movement. You've got the Hispanics. We saw this in the Democrats, and I think this is going to be a big problem for them, is that there's going to be intra-party fighting. We saw this starting to bubble up during this last election. The Democrats, when Joe Biden was trying to figure out who his running mate was going to be, the National Hispanic Caucus or whatever that political operation is for the Hispanic groups, they put out this brutal ad that was saying, why are you not talking about a Hispanic potential vice president? We do all of these great things. And so it's sort of, Democrats within Democrats fighting amongst themselves, and they just love, it's sort of it's just identity politics. It's just what we do. So I don't expect that to change. Thanks, Seji. We have some more. One from Tim McDaniel. This is kangaroo court that will hang you without due process. Seems very much like the vigilante methods used in the 1800s. Yeah, it's just all politics. All politics at this point. Catherine Kahn says, this guy is on point. Not sure if you were talking about me there, Catherine, or somebody else on the show, but we'll both appreciate that. Matt Maker Jenny says, if you told me to fight like hell, most people and myself would take that to mean legally, vocally, protesting, taking a stand, not physically. Me too, right? And everybody knows that. The other Democratic politicians know that as well. They all use that word. Everybody says fight. Fight like hell, I think somebody else said. And we played that super clip yesterday of all of the different, forceful language that people use in politics. That's politics. You use that type of language. It's not like, thank you for showing up here at the Save America rally. I'm going to encourage all of you to negotiate. Get up every morning and negotiate. Go out there, call your congresspeople and negotiate. Have conversations. Tell them that you are not mad, just tell them that you're slightly perturbed and that you want to negotiate a better deal. You could talk that way and nobody would listen to you. You never get elected. You got to encourage people. You got to create some energy. Fight like hell. Get out there. Go hard. Doesn't mean go storm the Capitol building. So to connect that chain, to tie what happened at the Capitol building to Donald Trump based on their own documents, okay? If they wanted to submit a different document, they could have done it. They didn't. They impeached him on a very narrow phrase that he used at the end of his speech, even though he used the word fight 20 other times prior to that in different contexts. Never once did he use it in the context about storming the Capitol building. Thanks, Matt Maker. We have Chris Wolney says their illegal speech standards need to also apply to TV news journalists and the politicians they interview. The double standards are piling up. I know they are. They're everywhere. I actually, I just started yesterday keeping a list of them. I have and on Twitter, you can make different lists. I called it the double standards list because I'm just seeing so much of them. I can't even talk about them all. There's too many. Seji, good to see you, Chris. We have another one from Seji. Says, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. This is a statement of truth. That's why they impeached him. Truth. Yeah, that's why they impeached him. Right? Okay, that's what they did. Beth Coddington says today, wait a minute. Let's go back. Beth Coddington says, today I saw an interview with a witness who said there was a group heading towards the Capitol before Trump began speaking. I'm hearing that more and more, as am I. And they're sort of, and so think about it this way, right? So if Donald Trump's statement that is in the article of impeachment that they're so upset about, if you fight like hell, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. That's the catchphrase by their own documents. I'm not making it up. That's in the article of impeachment. Okay. If that was said at the end of his speech, and there's evidence that people had already breached the Capitol barrier in the middle of his speech, how is it possible that those words could have incited that activity? It's not possible unless those protesters are from the future and they already heard what Trump was going to say before he said it. Makes no sense. MJ, so I guess we need to cancel any, quote, fight song, pep rally at high school or college, cheerleaders that have any, quote, fight in their cheer. What next? It's exactly right. It's just regular political talk. I don't know what else. What am I missing? Joaquin Acosta says, in the end, Pelosi grabbed Trump by the, got to be very careful here, by the push. All right. Thanks, Joaquin. Almost going to get me in trouble. I said I said something not so good yesterday. Miss Faith was laughing about it. Said, you know when you said Twitter, but you changed the I to an A? That was pretty funny, and it was. SGG69 says, Rob, you may want to move your practice to civil law. People's rights are being destroyed, and attorneys will be needed when the lawsuits start flying. Yes, so we are at the forefront in criminal law of protecting people's rights. That's why I love this area of law so much. I mean, criminal rights, I think, is the tip of the spear. You know, if you can start being charged with crimes and arrested, and the law is used in a way where they can literally take away your freedom, that is, we're right in the belly of the beast of this thing. So we're going to stay here. We're very good at this, at what we do, but I understand your point, and I do hope that there are other civil-minded lawyers who want to take that up. And certainly, if the law starts, the slippery slope here, or the logical extension of where some of this stuff goes is, the Trump supporters are labeled a terrorist organization, and now engaging in any type of this speech is now hate speech, and hate speech is criminalized. And if you say something that offends somebody, they charge you with a crime for that, or they put you on probation. And that's where we come into play. When they start criminalizing this stuff, which is just the logical extension of it. I don't know if they will or not, but we'll see. We will be ready to go. General Biochemistry says Pelosi and McConnell told the FBI of attacks on the Capitol. Trump was not. 2, attacks started prior to the time of the, quote, fight line spoken. Exactly right. I think that's accurate. Now, they're having competing timelines come out. So I saw one on the New York Times. I think the Washington Post just released one. But there is this weird gap where there was stuff that started before that line was even uttered. That line was the subject of their impeachment. And it's just logically not there. Sarah Bolin Smother says, do you think all the things happening, impeachment, free speech, suppression, blatant double standards, is to cause more tension? If they incite more violence, the more freedom they can take away. Sarah, I think this is a brilliant point. I've been thinking a lot about this, and I haven't brought it up yet, but I'm starting to see a pattern. And one of the patterns that I saw, and you can do what you want with this, but in my mind, some of the most egregious violators of what happened on Capitol Hill, they look to me to be some of this white supremacy contingent, right? Should be condemned totally. Don't support any of that. They look like they were the ones who were most aggressive, sort of like this, this militia-ish, whatever that is. I don't know that they've quantified that yet. They've made some arrests of the Proud Boys, and they've done sort of that stuff. But from what I have just sort of inferred, it seems like it was a lot of people who are a part of that demographic or that contingent. Okay, very fringy, not indicative of all Trump supporters at all. I'd say 99.99% of all Trump supporters would totally disavow all of those people. They happen to be the loudest and the most aggressive. And if I just had to sort of take a stab at it and lump them into a category, that's where I would lump them into, okay, sort of a white supremacy type of thing. They probably know that. And you'll notice there are some interesting racial provocateur stuff, issues that are now sort of bubbling up. Joe Biden and his new, I think, civil rights attorney had some problematic statements that she made in college about the black race being superior to the white race because of their pineal gland and because of melanin. They've got more melanin. That accounts for their darker skin, therefore they're superior. And that is something that is sort of, it's been news, right? It's sort of bubbling up. Now, I haven't spent much time talking about it because it's not necessarily legal. It could be a civil rights claim or a discrimination claim or equal protection or any of those things, but I'm not going to beat up on somebody who wrote something, 20 years ago in college. I have said a lot of dumb things in high school. I said less dumb things in college. I said less dumb things in law school, and I'm hopefully saying less dumb things now. And so, you want to give people a little bit of leeway, a little bit of freedom. But for Joe Biden to appoint somebody like that who has made those claims specifically, I think if you are a white supremacist, if you're in that camp, you're looking at that and your blood is boiling, right? I mean, it's really agitating to them. And that was just one. We saw another statement where Joe Biden, in one of his speeches, said specifically that they're not going to, in other words, they're going to focus on minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, Black, Hispanic, whatever he said. There was another speech that was out that was making the waves, and people were saying this is governmental discrimination. Didn't mention white people specifically. So that's another pattern, right? They're just sort of needling that fringe group. And I'm a little bit concerned about that, right? If that fringe group does show up in DC and does something else, they're going to do the same thing that we see them do with the Capitol Hill riots. They're going to just say, well, everybody who supported the president is guilty by association. This group did something bad. We're going to lump all of them in. They're going to clamp down on speech even more. They may potentially criminalize some language, and it can get very messy. So I'm very hopeful that there are no more altercations, right? I do not want to see any more violence. I do not want to see any of that stuff come up. But when you start to see some of these little pokes coming out, you got to wonder, why is that pattern repeating itself? And I'm sure there's going to be more, and I'm probably missing some as well. Very good point, Sarah. Thanks for bringing it up. Banana Bread with a very nice super chat says, impeachment process doesn't happen in a court of law. It's just a bunch of old hens in a cackle clutch, each pointing and saying, my egg's bigger than yours. If Trump's convicted, is there any appeal process if the Constitution isn't followed? So not to my knowledge. No, I don't know that he can appeal this. I mean, it's presided over by the Chief Justice, which is the highest court in the land. It's the highest judge in the land, and that's it. I mean, if the judge runs a fair trial, who are they going to appeal to? Where can they go? They can't go outside of the Chief Justice. So it would be the end of the line, right? This is sort of the highest court. I agree with you. It is just a bunch of old hens and what's the male version of that? Rooster, old roosters out there, and they're all just sort of having a grand old time. They want to just needle Trump on his way out. Thanks for that, Banana Bread. Appreciate. Very generous super chat. We'll make sure that is put to good use. Beth Coddington says, so no concerns about the dangerous precedent they would be set by impeaching at this point. No, I don't think so. I don't think that they have any. I think your question is, do they have any concerns about the dangerous precedent? Are they thinking that 4 years down the line, when the Republicans take control over one of the houses and maybe control of the presidency, maybe they impeach Joe Biden on the way out? The Republicans don't do that stuff. The Republicans are so weak. The Democrats are the ones who want blood at every corner. The Republicans just kind of just sit there and, oh, golly, shucks, golly gee shucks. We're just poor, nice Republicans. Vegas Mooch says, House Dems, tyranny of the majority. The founding fathers were anti-democracy for this very reason, and why the Constitution is anti-democratic. Yeah, tyranny of the majority. I think that was Alexis de Tocqueville. I think he talked about that in one of his writings. Having to dig into my political science, but yeah, if you have a pure democracy, there's some problems with that, right? First and foremost, most people don't know anything about how to run a country. Okay, people are subject to the whims of politicians. Politicians just sound fluffy and light. You get a Barack Obama type of person who's got a lot great rhetoric, excellent speaker. Somebody promises a lot, hope and change, hope and change, hope and change. Nobody knows what the hell that means, but he did it. He got elected with very little experience, and he got the majority, right? Most people were voting for him. Most people were in favor of that. And so, the founders saw that. They called it, like rhetoricians, and people who can come and just say a bunch of nice stuff, but not mean anything. In a democratic country where a lot of the populace doesn't know how to govern a country, they may fall prey to that. And the other downside is that, a majority can really, really be tyrannical against a minority group. And you see this a lot with this class warfare stuff that you see from some of the Democrats, that they want to raise everybody's taxes. They want to attack the rich. They want to attack, successful, businesses or whatever. And they want the mob to go and get themselves a raise. And it might feel good, might sound good, but may not be necessarily a good way to run a country. Winston J says, word is sting up. Trump working with good guys to bury them. Chatter D-Day real soon. Impeachment means submitting evidence. Swamp all hands on deck. So if they do impeach him, one of the arguments was that you'd have a trial. If Mitch McConnell did have a trial, you'd get to present a lot of evidence. But I think, Winston, as we're seeing, that it's not looking like that's going to happen. And if it does start on the 19th, according to Mitch McConnell, it's going to extend 37, 48 days or whatever. Joe Biden's going to be well ensconced in the White House. Another question. Let's see here. Where did this come from? Oh, it's from Ma. All right. So here's Ma. We got a nice little message from interesting. Amazon said it removed Parler because of a complete lack of oversight and control from its own employees, a quote hands-off approach, as they put it. This appears to be true as seen below. My question for you, Robert, is if you were to have a user-generated content on your website, would you trust a random selection of your users to determine if that user-generated content is illegal? Would you be comfortable with this potential liability being in the hands of random users? As a lawyer, you'd have a unique and special view of how juries function, so your input would be invaluable. Your Parler account will be expired after reaching 20 points. Contributing factors are pornography, threats of violence, illegal activities, or other guideline violations as determined by a jury of your peers, not employees of Parler. Okay, so I think Miss Faith put that in here. So would you feel comfortable with the potential liability being in the hands of random users? Well, Ma, it's kind of what you do, my friend. You keep things under control. I trust the hell out of you. You manage the Discord server pretty well, and you keep this chat in line. So, you're not a random user. Obviously, we've gotten to know each other for a certain period of time. But I think yes, right. You have to have some sort of moderation over your platform. Certainly, I'm a very big proponent of free speech, but I don't want people doing stuff that is clearly illegal. We're talking about child pornography. We're talking about, doing illegal things like transacting in drugs or many other things can be potentially illegal on there. And so, yeah, you want to have some oversight over that. It looks like Parler, I'm not real familiar with Parler, so I can't really speak to it. I think I made an account like 6 months ago and I never went on it, never used it, never looked at it, especially once Lynn Wood went over there and he was saying that he wanted to hang the president and or hang the vice president and all that type of stuff. Yes, that type of stuff should absolutely be removed and moderated. And I don't think you have free speech for those types of issues. But that's a little bit, I think, different than what we're talking about in terms of how what they're trying to do to solve this problem is, I think, way overbroad. They're sort of using a cannon to kill the mosquito, right? It's too much. They're deleting the entire platform. There's really nowhere else for people to go. And it is concerning because it's encompassing such a significant amount of legal speech, I would presume. Like I said, I didn't spend much time on Parler, but I would imagine that there's a lot of legitimate conversation happening, lawful, okay speech that was there. And that all got caught up in this broad sweeping shutdown. Now, I think some of the issues that Parler raised in their lawsuit about antitrust, about this sort of being a political hit, I think those sort of ring true to me, but I would be okay with some levels of moderation. I mean, I think that, a lot of these websites do it. I mean, Reddit, right, is mostly user moderated. All of those sub-communities have built user moderated forums. You've got Wikipedia, which is being, ran by the users. The entire thing is created by users. I think they're all working for free. So there are models and mechanisms in which it can work. I think Parler just wasn't there yet. Now they can get there. If they do, maybe Amazon will let them back. I really doubt it. But I think the model can work. I think Gab is trying to do something similar where they have different individuals who are responsible for moderating the content. And you're asking, as a lawyer, you'd have a unique and special view of how juries function, so your input would be invaluable. So I think it's kind of hard to analogize to a jury. A jury is sort of forced to do some of that. They're sort of no juror really wants to be there. Some of them do, but most of them do not. They're all sort of angry. Doesn't bode well for our clients when they're angry at our clients for making them sit there. But, it's sort of a captive audience. They break into a room and they can't leave. And so they're sort of mandated. They're almost like an employee to a certain extent. So I'm not sure that even though, it's a volunteer and it's jury duty and it's their civic duty and all that stuff. I mean, if the judge doesn't let you out of it, you're there. You're kind of an employee at that point. So I'm not real sure how much insight we can glean from that. But yeah, I think it's possible. I think that, Ma, you're an excellent example. You've created a culture and you moderate and you manage that in the Discord server. You do a hell of a job there. So I think it is possible. And we're appreciative of you for that reason. Thank you, Ma. We have another one from Rachel S. Says, Trump should consider squashing the second-term conspiracies. It would be the compassionate thing to do. January 20th will be a major disappointment otherwise. The second-term conspiracies. Should consider squashing the second-term conspiracies. I'm not sure. I see. Are you saying that Donald Trump should be more vocal in squashing the conspiracies that he's going to get a second term? So squash the idea that he's going to get a second term. Yeah, I would. I mean, yes, I kind of think he's done that. He gave a concession speech. Mike Pompeo is also conceding at this point. He was sort of the last holdout. He has multiple statements that it's over, peaceful transition of power. People still aren't buying it, though. I'm not real sure what Trump could do that would convince people to do that. I still see a lot of people on Twitter saying, no. Now the real date is now January 20th. And January 20th doesn't even matter because Trump's got another ace up his sleeve. And it's like, I don't know that there's anything rational that you could say that would convince those people otherwise. They're just going to believe that until the end of the days. Sven the Patriot. Robert, thank you for your consistently fair-minded analysis. Tuned into most shows since mid-November. A couple more chats coming to share my time in D.C. Tuned into most shows since mid-November. A couple more. Okay, great. Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Sven the Patriot. I appreciate that. And I'm glad that you're here. Glad that you're enjoying the program. Another one from Sven. Oh, okay. A couple more from Sven. Was at the Ellipse for Trump's speech. High energy crowd, not violent, left with the crowd, stopped at hotel, tail end of the breach on the news. All protesters out when I arrived. Was at the protest from 3 to 6, saw 0 acts of vandal and violence. So here's a report from somebody who was on the ground. Sven the Patriot. High energy crowd, not violent, left with the crowd, stopped at the hotel, tail end of the breach was on the news. All protesters were out when I arrived. Was at the protest from 3 to 6, saw 0 acts of vandal and violence. And that was my interpretation of it as well. We were watching it. It looked like it was just sort of an explosion of activity, and then it was totally calm. Right? It was this big eruption of violence, and then it was people just meandering through the Capitol building until they escorted them all out. Another one from Sven. My favorite moment, older guy stood in front of the riot police with a loudspeaker to pray for law enforcement and remind everyone they are not our enemy, even as they push him. Wish I had seen stuff like this on the news. And I did see a clip of Alex Jones doing that. I wonder if you're talking about him, but there was Alex Jones, who I think was standing on the top of a vehicle shouting, and I think it was from this. I mean, I just saw it on Twitter, so I haven't fact checked it, but he was shouting, hey, don't go in there. Don't go to the Capitol building. We're not, we're not like them. We're not Antifa. We don't break things. And yeah, it would have been nice if they would have reported on some of that. Kenny 1B says every president will be impeached if the House and the president are different political parties. RICO application to Amazon versus Parler. Yeah, so like a racketeering charge. Yeah, maybe. I think, yeah, maybe they could do something like that. But I agree. Yeah, I mean, the impeachment standard is so low, and the Democrats have really set the bar really, really low. I mean, on that document, I think all of them are technically guilty. Any single politician who's ever used the word fight in a political speech, if they're going to impose that standard on President Trump, it should be applied to them. Sharon Quidney says innocent until proven guilty, right? Unless you are Donald Trump. Donald Trump has... he's apparently the only person in America that doesn't apply to. Sven the Patriot says, FYI, I posted a handful of links in Discord general detailing photos, videos of non-MAGA actors, such as a guy changing outfits behind police line. Yeah, so I think, Sven, that is the same interview that Miss Beth Coddington sent our direction, and it's queued up. I have it in my queue. I just haven't watched it yet, so maybe I'll get to that tonight. Another one, Test 1, says... The TH proved that rioters couldn't have listened to Trump's speech and then made it into the stairs of Congress in a time period, obviously. The people in control refused military help, so this could happen. Yeah, two things, right? Mayor Bowser refused any of the National Guard from coming in early. We just saw from the former chief of police, Sund. He said that he raised some concerns. They told him the optics were bad. So there were some people who saw this coming, and there was another group of people who were made aware that other respectable people saw it coming and they did nothing about it. I would love to know more about that, and I really hope that we get to the bottom of this in the future. Rajesh Shakar says Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene said on Newsmax just now she is introducing articles of impeachment on Joe Biden on January 21st for the Ukraine scandal. There we go. Good. Look, at least it's equal opportunity impeachments. All right, I'm all for standards being applied evenly. Is this political? Yes, absolutely. Is Marjorie Taylor Greene staining Joe Biden's incoming week, months, year of his administration? Yes. Do I care at all about that? Not even a little bit. They did it to Donald Trump. Fair is fair. Serves him right. Andrew Bohr says the FBI and the DC rep AG press conference should give you pause if you're really thinking of following the rioters' example. Really rethink it, please, yes, it's not a good idea. As much as you may, want to go protest and be a patriot and go fight for America or whatever that is. I can't say fight for America. I'll be impeached. You should go negotiate forcefully on behalf of America. All right. So if you go do that, I just don't think it's worth it at all. I do not think at this point in time it's going to serve anything. It's just going to exacerbate the situation. The FBI, the Department of Justice, the U.S. attorneys, they are coming down hard on this stuff. And they should. It was gross behavior for the people that actually did something wrong. If they're going to lump up everybody into the scope of this investigation and they didn't do anything other than sort of be there, come on, is that justice? No. Go get the people who had a plan. Go get the people who were beating the cops. Go get those people who are breaking things and sort of, fomenting this fictitious faking, coup thing that they had a mental disorder that they thought that they were going to achieve. Those are the people that need to be addressed, not everybody else. So I would agree. If you're there, there's a high likelihood that you're going to get lumped into this thing, and I just don't want to see that for anybody. Saji Takahari, maybe you are just trying to be humble. However, what does qualification mean if the argument is logically unsound and invalid or informal fallacies? Maybe you were just trying to be humble. However, what does qualification? So I'm not sure in what context you're talking about. Qualification, if the argument is logically unsound and invalid or informal fallacies. Seji, I'm just not sure what you're referencing there. I'm trying, but I just don't know what you're talking about. So informal fallacies, there's a lot of logic questions in there, but I'm not sure about what issue we should apply those concepts to. Seji said, okay, so remove your radical left from the government via impeach Biden, Harris, Schumer, Romney, then rerun an election with new candidates within a month. All right. Yeah. So I think they're all elected. So you'd have to run against them the next season, the next election season, or you'd have to do a recall election. We have Lady Anderson says, is it appropriate to ask the Senate to push laws that forbid courts to approve state law changes across the U.S., whether for a pandemic or not? They're still at it trying to get Texas court to approve mail-in voting, mail-in ball, maybe mail-in voting. So yeah, there are actually laws like that in effect. I think the Voting Rights Act is one of those laws that says that there are certain, I could be wrong about this, but I think it says that you can't make major changes to like your voter registration rolls within 90 days of an election. This is one of the same arguments that Judge Abrams Gardner, who was Stacey Abrams' sister, federal court judge, she made that same argument when they were trying to clean up the voter rolls out of Georgia prior to this last Senate election. She said, nope, it's too close to the election, can't make changes within 90 days, and that was that. So there is precedent for it. So I think, yes, you could make laws, and I think there was one, I think out of Wisconsin, or maybe it was Michigan. Yeah, the Michigan Supreme Court has been very aggressive with telling Governor Whitmer that she can't keep doing this stuff anymore. She can't keep locking down the country, or her state in this case, indefinitely. And so they're sort of putting some temporal, so time limitations on the extent of what some of these government officials can do. And I think that's a very good thing. And I think that I would truthfully like to see more sort of an expansion of certain civil rights for economic interests, right? If you are an American citizen and you want to engage in commerce with another private person, and you both know the risks of coronavirus, and you both know the risks of this, and you still want to get together and do business or open up your shop or whatever that is, there should be more protections for that, because what we saw this last 9-10 months has been ridiculous. I mean, there's still, coronavirus is going bananas, even in states that have been locked down for 9 months. California's been locked down, as far as I know, for the better part of 9 months, and their cases are still spiking through the roof. So I would like to see more economic protections in place for people who want to, just be adults and live their lives. I think that would be a good thing. Lava Java Lava says, how does an individual with previous mental health problems acquire such dangerous weapons? Good question. Yeah, good question. I would be curious about where those came from. If he had been sort of adjudicated incompetent, then yeah, he would have been on a list somewhere and never would have been able to buy a firearm. But if he got these from, say, a gun show or bought them in a private sale, he may have skirted those regulations. Another one from Sasha Shisha. Trump, all-time impeachment winner, always winning. That's right. Nobody beats him. Nobody beats him. Okay, impeached twice. And if he's not convicted on this thing, he could say, yeah, I was impeached twice and not convicted on either one of them. How you like me now, right? You tried me twice. I beat you both times. So he'll flip that into a positive, and it's pretty funny. Seiji Takahari says, firearms are only dangerous when used, but of course, living in Hiroshima without guns being easily owned, what would I know, right? Yeah, guns are only dangerous. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of legitimate reasons to have guns. A lot. And it's a pretty important right here in the United States. Don't know how other countries handle firearms and weaponry, but it's our Second Amendment for a reason. First is free speech. Second is the right to keep and bear arms. Why are they that way? Why didn't we put the Second Amendment down like at number 9 or 10? It's right up there. And free speech is number 1. Pretty important stuff. Good to see you. Moving on. SSW Lamb is next. Hey, Rob, didn't Pelosi request the Joint Chiefs Chairman Mark Miley to ensure Trump does not launch a nuclear attack? Is that sedition? Impeach Pelosi? Yeah, I think it's the literal definition of a coup. It's one person in government trying to seize power from another person in government who has the lawful authority to wield that power. Nancy Pelosi did that when she contacted the Joint Chiefs. I think it's totally a coup. And if they want to impeach Trump for some stupid language that he said about fighting at the end of a speech when they were already breaking into the Capitol building, that standard is so low. Yeah, you can impeach Nancy Pelosi on virtually anything at this point, as you can with any other person in Congress. Jay Vodun says, how are all these entities getting away with not saying allegedly when they say Trump incited a riot? Isn't that slander? Yeah. I mean, I think it's an opinion. Donald Trump is a public figure, so they can, they have a little bit more leeway, especially if they're talking about news. People can say a lot of opinion type of things about public figures, and they're not automatically subject to libel or defamation. When you have a public figure, the standard raises up a little bit, and you have to look for actual malice there. You actually have to find a statement that is intentionally not true and intentionally malicious. Like somebody said something that they knew was not true and they intended to say that to harm you for it. So, if they're not meeting those two prongs, then they're free to get away with it. And there's so many people, there's sort of this chorus of people saying that stuff that, Trump's not going to do anything about it. I think it's intellectually improper, but they're free to do it. They own the media. And SSW Lamb says, media is propaganda. We need to fact check the media. The guy was not at the Capitol riots. Bad text is not a crime, a misdemeanor charge only. Yeah, it's just the media was totally off on that. If you read those headlines, he was part of the Wednesday crowd, but he really wasn't. We have Denise Rosulek. Your metaphor about our driving, committing violence a couple times every day the other day, stuck. Good point. Yeah, driving, right? You break the law every time you get in the car, multiple times, and you don't even know it. If you get in your car and drive to work at 2 p.m. and you make a wide right turn, meaning you don't turn into the immediate lane, not a big deal, right? Nobody cares. Everybody does it about 1 million times a day. But if you do that at 2 a.m. and a cop sees you, he's going to pull you over for DUI, investigate you, potentially arrest you, search all your stuff. You broke the law. So just got to remember that, right? Everything is highly, highly criminalized in this country. Map Maker Jenny says, like you said before, if we don't change the law, take the proper legal action. If we don't like the law, take the proper legal action to change it. Yeah, that's the best way to do it, because if you do something that's illegal, then you are going to be prosecuted by the very government that you want to change. And you're also going to be delegitimized by the people who you need to win to your favor, right? If people see you doing illegal things, they're going to say, well, I can't be associated with that. You lose your legitimacy, all of your credibility. Nothing gets done. What we're seeing happen now is the other side takes it and runs with it. They get very excited about it, and they want to lump in your cause, which may otherwise be legitimate, with the malfeasance, and that doesn't serve anybody. Thanks, Matt Maker. Liberty or Death says, Article 5 convention would be great. Congress can't stop that. 15 states on board, need 33, could set term limits and repeal the 17th Amendment. Yeah, it would be good to have a constitutional convention, Liberty. I think that would be, I think we could get a lot done. And I would love to bypass Congress, because they are just useless. They really don't, and nobody likes, on both sides, right? Can we just agree? Can Democrats and Republicans and conservatives and liberals just agree Congress is useless? They don't do anything good, at least not recently, unless it is about passing spending bills. They get that done very quick. Miss American Mom 89 says, if cheerleaders cheer, fight, 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 and then an actual fight breaks out on the field, did the cheerleaders incite violence? This is crazy. It's crazy, and that's a good analogy. It's true. Yeah, I mean, they're seditious. Cheerleaders are they're pretty tough. I could see some sedition going on in the ranks out there in a high school football game. It's all nonsense. General Biochemistry 1, I watched Capitol Police wave people into the Capitol. Isn't that entrapment? Yeah, so entrapment it's sort of overly used. Entrapment would mean the government was inducing you to do something that you wouldn't otherwise do. So if you're sitting there thinking about doing something illegal, or let's say not illegal, and a government agent comes in and convinces you to do something illegal that you were not even considering, and you do that thing, then that would be entrapment. That's sort of that's the differentiator. If you were going to do it already and a government agent just came in and helped you do that, that's not entrapment. It's if you are not going to do something and that government agent, whoever that is, induces you to do that thing, then that becomes entrapment. So for your question, I think that they were going to enter that building anyways. At least sort of that first wave, there were some people who were really pressed up against the door. I think I saw the same video you're talking about. They're pressed up against the door, and the door just opens, and they walk in, and the cop says, "I don't agree with you, but I respect you." And they walk right by him, and they just kind of stroll around the Capitol. So is the opening of the door entrapment? Would they have gone in anyways? I don't know. I think it's a good argument. You could make it both ways. It's a good question, though. We'll see if their defense attorneys do that. If you're a defense attorney, certainly, you're going to make that argument all day. Seiji Takahari says, wait, did she kill a pregnant woman and scoop out the baby? Wow, America is a wild place. That's exactly what she did. That's why she got the death penalty and was executed. SSW Lamb, Dems playing political games. Why not use the time to get the $2,000 COVID relief checks to U.S. citizens? The primaries will hurt non-Trump Republicans. I agree with that. I think that, I saw a video yesterday, heartbreaking video of some woman on Twitter, got a bunch of retweets, who was saying that she couldn't buy her son insulin because it cost $1,000 a shot. And she walked into CVS and they said it's $1,000. And she said, I can't buy it. So I got to go home to my son. She said, I work 3 jobs. I work all the time. Husband works 2 jobs, works all the time. Can't afford it. In America, the richest country in the world. But Congress people can send $700 million to the Sudan. They can send, whatever those numbers were. Cambodia, Venezuela, Nepal, Israel, all of these different places. Just gobs of money. But we can't help a mom working 3 jobs pay for insulin for her son. What the hell kind of country is this? All right, we have Paul Roberts. Hi from the UK. What's up from the UK? The security was so lack. Imagine if a true terrorist like ISIS did the same. Your entire elected government could have been gone. Great work, Rob. Thanks, Paul Roberts. I appreciate that. Good to hear you from the UK. Super cool. And I'm glad that you're here. I agree, right? It's basically the entire government. I mean, if this was really, really orchestrated and planned and you had some serious actors doing this thing, it could have been catastrophic. I mean, beyond catastrophic. It's amazing that it wasn't, but it does show you just how incompetent our government really is at the highest levels. They can't even protect themselves. You think that they care about you and grandma? They can't even protect their own building. Do you think that they care about grandma getting COVID? I don't. Seiji Takahari says, so if someone did a Montgomery in Japan and they did not put them to death, that would be a stain on society. So no, it is part of civil society. So I'm not sure. Oh, did a Montgomery in Japan and they did not put them to death, that would be a stain on society. So no, it is part of civil society. Okay, so you're saying in Japan, they would also execute Montgomery. Okay, good to know. I don't know anything about Japanese capital punishment rules or culture. Apparently, that makes sense, right? I mean, don't the Japanese, they were the ones who commit, Harry Carey, something like that, where they sort of, the shame is so great that they disembowel themselves. Was that just in the movies? I should stop talking about this because I don't know what I'm talking about. SSW Lamb says, I understand the serious nature of the crime of the executed lady, but capital punishment is cruel and barbaric. Isn't it better to try to reform a person? Yeah, I agree with that, SSW Lamb. I'm a fan of sort of the redemption story I know people that I've worked with, I've represented. I know other people who I've just become friends with who have done horrible things in their lives, have committed horrendous crimes, but they've served their time. They pay a debt to society. They get help. They learn things. They read books. They truly do become reformed, and they go out and help other people. They help people who might otherwise commit a crime or do something wrong. Nip that in the bud early so that they don't go down that road. There's a guy that I interviewed on this channel a long time ago before our channel was, I think we have maybe 1,000 subscribers. His name is Andre Norman. Wrote a book called something about, look him up. I can't remember the name of the book, but he was a guy who was in solitary confinement for like 10 years, and he may have even been on death row, right? But something happened in his case. He got out. Now he's a motivational speaker. He goes around to prisons and he shows other people how not to follow in that same path and stop living a life of crime. So he's using his story to go out and do good in the world. He couldn't do that if he was dead. We have Captain Jim says, per the Gallup poll, Congress's approval rating has been in the 30s or so or less since 2005. 9%, 7/13, November 13th. How on earth do these people get reelected? Because it's just how the system is set up. You see, what happens is they are in power for such a long period of time that they are able to sort of grift off the treasury and trickle all that pork down to their home states, where they will then sort of build up their own little political capital by giving a bunch of people money, funding a bunch of programs, and just sort of expanding their base because everybody's a part of the grift and they get a lot of money. And the people, they're just not plugged into politics. They know that they've seen a name on there for 10 years and feels like the right name, and they don't know the other guy, and they know this guy, well, he's not so bad. So, okay, we'll just vote for John McCain again for the sixth time. We'll vote for Joe Biden again for the 50th time because we don't know who the other person is. Sort of the devil you know is better than the devil you don't, and they just keep getting reelected. There's also no third party. Pinky number 2 says, thanks, Rob, Faith, and Ma for all that you do. Is there a phone we can get that is not Apple or Android and software we could use? So done. I think there is. Is BlackBerry still around? Is Nokia still around? I think everybody's still using Android at this point. So Android in and of itself is, yes, it's a Google product, but it's sort of its own independent open source operating system. So I'm not real sure what the permutations of that look like. Like LG has a phone, Samsung has a phone. Many of them, right? Many big ones that have a lot of Android phones. Now, I don't know how connected those are to the Google backend. It's an Android operating system, which was really promulgated by Google, but I'm not sure, if you have to get plugged into Google services in order to use it. I don't think so, though. So I think maybe a different Android variety would be right. Aaron Sevi says, Rob, what do you think about adding another office, a fourth branch called the People House? New branch would have power to break, check, snap, power play. So the people are sort of that branch, and the states are sort of supposed to be that branch also. And that's why we have things like a constitutional convention, and the states on their own can kind of come together, call a constitutional convention, and then challenge and reform the federal government. The founders wanted a mechanism for that. They didn't want to invest all the power in the federal government. They wanted to give the states some autonomy and an ability to collectively get together and then petition the federal government in our system of federalism. We've got a federal government and then a bunch of local state governments. So, I'm not sure that we need another branch. I think that's sort of already built in and baked into the Constitution. We just got to educate people about using it. And I think that we may see more of that talk in the upcoming years. Seiji Takahari, you Americans, plus stop stereotyping. Stereotyping is based on bad data. If you come to an analysis and are talking about another country, WTF. A lot of WTF, Seiji. We have XN1. Pelosi already broke their new House rules, so yeah, great show. Keep it up. What were the new House rules? Was it the language they could use, the him, her, she's, the pronouns? Not sure what House rules she broke. Curtis Bartle says, if Trump gets impeached and a hearing doesn't that open the door for voter fraud? So I think you're talking, Curtis, about the Senate trial. So yes, in the Senate trial, they could ultimately present evidence, right? Donald Trump would be able to defend himself. What kind of evidence he presents, I think that would be subject to what the Chief Justice, Judge Roberts, I think that would be subject to what he wants to allow in. So that, there aren't real rules. If you sue somebody in a civil court, you have civil rules of procedure. If you go to criminal court like we do, we have criminal rules of procedure. It's open. You can look them up. I think every state probably has their own set of rules. We have the federal rules of evidence. We have rules about how these things are conducted, what evidence can come in, what cannot, what is hearsay, what isn't. And in an impeachment trial, I think it's subject to what the Chief Justice wants to do. So if they want to open that door and talk about electoral fraud, maybe. If they wanted to limit the scope and say, no, you can only talk about this statement during the Save America rally and the following Capitol Hill riots, you could probably limit the scope of that. Haley Michelle says, is there anything to all these people saying they want to send Trump supporters to reprogramming camps? So, Haley, I think the only thing on that is what we saw from Project Veritas, which was a statement from, I think it was a PBS attorney who was out with, somebody undercover with Project Veritas. And he was saying stuff like that, like we want to take their children, put them in re-education camps and all that type of stuff. My understanding is that guy has been fired. I think PBS came back out and said he was like a mid-level staffer, doesn't speak for the organization. And, you're making much ado about nothing. So I think that's the extent of what I've seen for it. And So no, I don't think there's much there to it. If there's other evidence, if anybody else who's elected starts talking about that stuff, I think that's certainly cause for concern. John Kreutz, Uganda, where Twitter and Facebook want open internet and free expression. That's another thing where I think they're goading people. So I answered, I forget who it was, I apologize, another question about this pattern of goading. And it was sort of the nomination of somebody who had some questionable racial commentary in her past to a very important civil rights U.S. attorney position. We also had Joe Biden saying that they're going to focus on essentially non-white businesses in order to support them as they're going through. And then you have Twitter and Facebook really just goading everybody saying, well, we're going to delete you guys, but we're not going to, we're going to speak out against Ugandan limitations on freedom of expression. It's just kind of needling them a little bit. Kenneth Slayer says Proud Boys are not racists of any kind. We talked about that. I think one of the founders of the Proud Boys, I'm pretty sure he's like half black. Shady Carey, you mentioned Capitol security earlier. Have you ever watched Designated Survivor? Basically lays out the scenario of the legislature being destroyed. I did. I think I watched the first season of that. That was with Kiefer Sutherland. I'm a huge Kiefer Sutherland fan. I got to be honest. When 24 was a show, I loved that show. So good. And Designated Survivor was also fun. Designated Survivor is sort of that like worst case scenario we're talking about. And the entire Congress is in the Capitol building and then it explodes. Some terrorist sets off something, wipes out the entire government. And so you go through the Presidential Succession Act and you go, okay, well, next person's the House Speaker, then it's this person in the cabinet, then it's secretary this, and you go all the way down. They had the designated survivor who was at the very end of that secession list. He was the only one who was not in that room, so he suddenly became president because everybody else was dead. Kind of a fun show. I think season 2 was kind of weak, or I fell off of it. It's a good show, though. Seiji Takahari. Japan is militarizing against our Constitution's renunciation of war because the U.S., who provides security, is busy being barbarians. Please stop. I'll do my best. Stop being barbarians, America. Stop it. We have Chris Wolney. Have you thought about brushing up on your skills in Bivens cases? No, I have not. No, I don't even know what you're referencing. Bivens cases? I apologize. I don't know what that is, Chris Wolney. You're right. I got to take your suggestions. I got to brush up on those. We have Isaac Castillo, the blacklist, public outing, shaming, and not allowing political opposition to live, work. Feels like it's akin to McCarthyism, waiting for that shoe to drop. Yeah, a lot of people are referencing McCarthyism and this sort of rooting out of people who are opposed to the main party line. Back during the McCarthy days, it was all about communism, finding out those red commies and sort of rooting them out, and then using the government to gobble up more power for surveillance and, tapping individuals and sort of, encroaching upon civil liberties. Some of this is starting to feel that way. Thanks for that, Isaac. Za Jiang says, did you see what Twitter said about Uganda's action to censor Twitter and Facebook during their election? Yeah, I think I tweeted on. I think I just said LOL on it. I mean, at this point, it's like, I honestly think that they're goading us. I think that they're just trying to goad the American people to say, a week after they banned Donald Trump, they start talking about free expression, fair elections, and the democratic processes after they just literally deleted the president. Are they talking like, does the Twitter policy team know what the Twitter CEO team did? Of course they did. So I think it's intentional. Isaac Castillo, happy Wednesday. Did you see Arnold's video, Arnold Schwarzenegger? He posted about regarding last week's Capitol riots. Thoughts? Did you notice how in the title he's governor, not former governor, slapped to Newsom? I did not see it. I actually am a big Arnold fan. I don't agree with his politics, but he's somebody who I sort of looked up to growing up. I always liked the fact that he was a kind of a self-made guy, took a big risk, came over to the United States. I think there was a Bill Burr had that great statement. He was in the zone for like 40 years. He did this, I'm going to be the biggest actor. I'm going to be the biggest bodybuilder. I'm going to be the governor now. And he did it. He's like outstanding. He's lived an incredible life. And he's a little bit of a fall from grace. Not so sure he was such a great governor or his politics are on point, but I did not see the video, but I think I have that queued up in my bookmarks on Twitter. So I'll take a look at that. Thanks, Isaac. And my brother, by the way, my brother Joey, he has Down syndrome. Huge Arnold fan. Huge. And it just happens to be the case that Arnold also helps out a lot with the Special Olympics. And so on my bucket list, I would love, if anybody can help me with this, I would love to have my brother meet Arnold. My brother Joey, he's 34 now. Arnold's biggest fan. He's got Arnold Schwarzenegger posters all over his room and loves the guy. And so hopefully I can get that done one of these days. We have Lady Anderson says, another poke from the Dems is having Swalwell still in his position, let alone impeachment team, bugged by smug face, literally always smirking. Yeah, Swalwell is one of the most interesting, let me just say interesting guy, right? He kind of just keeps plugging along, even though he's in the middle of this bizarre sort of Chinese spy investigation. I think he's still on the one of the security committees in the House. You're saying, wait a minute, how is that happening? Thanks, Lady Anderson. Claire DeLuna says, after a long day of classes and administering vaccines, what way do you think people would argue against and for corporate compulsory vaccines? What do you think people would argue against and for corporate compulsory vaccines? That's a big question. I mean, my initial thought is against vaccines would be, right, it's personal autonomy. You don't want your employer to tell you what to do with your body. Pretty obvious in my mind, and that's essentially the position I would take, right? If I was working for somebody, I don't. This is my company, but if I were working for somebody, then I would certainly say, you don't get to tell me what to do with my body. No way, shape, or form. No, thank you. And an employer could easily just turn around and say, it's fine. Don't work here anymore. Okay. We want to protect ourselves, and you don't get to work here if you're not safe. And this is our new policy. And if the government doesn't say what some of those rights and responsibilities are, then it could get pretty messy there. But, compulsory vaccines, making people do something that is, still sort of, I think, questionable, right? I read somewhere that even a lot of healthcare people don't want to take the vaccine. And if you're in a low risk category, if you're somebody like me, 35, healthy, take good care of myself, don't drink alcohol, I'm pretty good shape. Why? And if my risk category is so low and my employer told me I had to do something with my body, I might just say, no, I'm out of here. But, that doesn't leave a lot of options for that person. Now they're without a job. What if every single employer in the country now wants mandatory vaccines? It's going to be a whole different can of worms, Claire. We have Keith Brown says, during election 2026, media said Rubio and Cruz were worse than Trump and should be the real concern. It's not Trump. It's NE1 we run. It's anyone we run. Remember during the election in 2016, media said Rubio and Cruz were worse. Should be the real concern. Yeah. This is just the standard playbook, right? Every single time that there's a Republican in power, the media hates the Republican. Then as soon as they leave power, well, they weren't so bad because the next person who's coming down the pike is significantly worse. They did this with with George Bush. George Bush was a warmonger. He was evil. Cheney, no war for oil, the whole thing. I mean, if you remember back in during those years, it was the worst. I mean, he was a war criminal. I mean, that's what they were calling him, the worst in the world. Now, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and George Bush are just pals. They're just pals. They're just hanging out, and they're going to be at the inauguration, sitting together, being buddy old pals. And everybody in the media is once again sort of drooling over this, saying, "Oh gosh, look at this unity. What a statesman. What a great guy." George Bush, he's just coming together to show that he can be a part of the team. Excellent. None of the warmonger stuff. It's all forgotten. They're really, really excited about Liz Cheney voting to impeach Donald Trump. They hated Dick Cheney. They hated him. He was the worst person in the world. He was the mastermind. He was the brains behind the operation. And so it's just the same playbook. And it's going to expire at some point as soon as they find a new villain. John Krutz says, Amazon trying to compare Parler to being similar to some of the offerings of Silk Road or other dark websites is absurd. Yeah, Parler was super benign. I mean, honestly, there was some bad stuff on there that I saw just tangentially. I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but when you compare it to some of the other sites like 4chan or some of these 8chan sites or whatever they are, and in particular the dark web and all that, I mean, there's some really gruesome stuff on the internet. Parler was pretty mainstream. It was by Dan Bongino. There was a number of Sean Hannity, I think, was on there. Some other elected officials. It was pretty much par for the course, typical conservative stuff. Haley Michelle says, can they really put Trump supporters in camps? Well, no, they can't. I mean, not right now, not under anything that we see existing in our current framework. If that changes and they say that all Trump supporters are terrorists and they're all responsible for the Capitol building and they all need to be investigated, and then they can use the investigation to tap your phone, and then they find your phone and they find something that is illegal on there, or that you did something that is a little bit outside the confines of the rules, or they ask you questions about something and then you answer those questions in one particular way and they charge you with a crime for answering those questions wrong. It's called a process crime. So you didn't actually commit an underlying offense. You just answered questions during an investigation wrong, which is illegal. They can't do that. They charge you with a crime. Then they can prosecute you in that manner. So you can see, you can easily connect the chain, but I'm not hopeful that happens. Whoa, we have a nice one, very nice one from Stacy SI. Says, really enjoy listening. Thank you. Major super chat, Stacy. Thank you so much for that. It's genuinely appreciated. We're trying to figure out how we can up level this show. Miss Faith and I just had a meeting about this afternoon. We were talking specifically about, okay, let's level this up. How do we deliver more value in 2021? How do we increase the production quality, produce more videos, maybe do more interviews, appear on more shows, create more so that we can provide more value, and the support through the super chats and some other things that we're going to potentially be trying to do will help us with that. We can build a bigger team, hire some more people, and do what we need to do in order to move things up. And so, Stacy, thank you for helping us in that mission, sincerely. We have one from Teacher Man 1955 says, I've read that a story on NPR that was headlined Trump supporters storm the U.S. Capitol, clash with police, was first posted at 9:33 a.m. on January 6th. That's curious. Was it 9:33 a.m. Washington time? Because that's like they predicted the future. Or did they already know what was coming? Aaron CV says, Rob, possible that vote info found more than thought, and if brought to light could cause greater damage to the system, so suppress it to fix. Quiet. So I think what you're asking, Aaron, is if they found more evidence of, say, election problems or voter fraud or whatever they're talking about. Yeah, I think that it would be well within their interest to not let that come to light. Because if there was some sort of explosive document that came out after the fact, this country would be in uproar. They'd be in uproar for two things. Number one, you have the wrong person in the White House. But number two, probably bigger, would be that meant massive suppression throughout this last 60 days or so when this stuff should have been investigated. I think it would be very, very problematic. And so they would have every single interest in the world to make sure that never came to light. Hidden Prophet says, I got to say, I'm fully convinced now that our politicians are just overpaid actors. American ideology seems to be slowly dying. I agree with that. I was listening to an interview between Michael Malice and Hotep Jesus, who, both of those guys are sort of, I think, brilliant in their own ways, and they're Michael Malice in particular, he's sort of a provocateur. He kind of likes to get out there and needle people. He does a good job on it. He's a good follow on Twitter too. Both of those guys are very good follows, and I would like to actually do some interviews with them at some point. But Hotep was saying that Barack Obama was an excellent president. And I was thinking he seemed pretty inconsequential to me. I mean, what did he really do? I've tried to think about it. I've tried to think about Obamacare. Okay, that was deleted with the stroke of a pen as soon as Trump came in. So that didn't last long. He killed, what's the guy's name? Osama bin Laden, right? Had him killed. And then I was thinking, well, what did he do with that? And then I looked up the picture of the Situation Room when they're watching the special forces go in and take him out. And Obama's like not even really sitting at the table. He's sort of like in the corner. You got Joe Biden's there, Hillary Clinton's at the table, the Joint Chiefs are there, but Obama's just kind of, they just got a folding chair and they just kind of set him in the corner. And so I was like, well, what is Hotep talking about? What's his point going to be here? And he said essentially exactly what you're saying, Hidden Prophet. He's a very good actor. You know, he kind of did the things that presidents do. They go out, they give nice speeches, they make everybody feel good. They sort of rally support for certain causes. Remember when Obamacare was going through, he was giving speeches all over the place. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. That didn't happen. But, you know, that's what they do. They sort of rally support. They're not intended to really do much of anything. You know, the infrastructure is already in motion. The wheels of the government are constantly moving forward. You just kind of need a president to come and just be a spokesperson for what's happening underneath the surface. And Trump was not that type of president at all, right? I mean, he's very hands-on, you know, making these task forces, you know, starting all sorts of stuff, right? We can go on and on and on about all the things that have happened in this administration. We don't need to do that. But I think Hotep was sort of echoing your point that they're all just sort of out there as spokespeople for their districts. There's bigger forces that are behind the scenes that are really responsible for what happens in this country. And the politicians are just the facilitator to help get it done. That's it. That's why you have guys like Josh Hawley, who apparently, you know, they're the sort of fiscal conservatives. They like, you know, it's a populist agenda. They want to help the little man, help Americans, but they still pass $2.4 trillion bills with $600 coming back to Americans. That's because it's not about that. It's not about really what they can deliver. It's about how they can sort of smooth things over behind the scenes. That's just my extremely, extremely cynical view of our government. General Biochemistry says, can the people file a class action suit against Congress for mismanagement of our taxes? Nope, can't do that. The Supreme Court and other courts have said that you can't file generalized grievances for stuff like that. Like if you're just angry about taxes, you can't sue the government. Sorry, the government has the ability to do those things. So try something else, and something like that would not work. We have Ted Wendelbo says, you can get insulin for $25 at Walmart over the counter. Well, there you go. Somebody should have told this woman that, because she was pretty hysterical and I felt bad for her. I didn't know that. If it's $25 over the counter at Walmart, maybe it was a special insulin or some other medicine. I could be wrong about the insulin. Maybe it was some other medicine, but she couldn't get it. And I felt bad for the lady. We have Toots Magoots. Toots Magoots. The guy had guns, ammo, targets, said he was going to the range and some charged text. His weapons are registered. Mental illness is a stretch. He had the means to use deadly force during a confrontation, but didn't. Yeah, but he didn't, right? He didn't do it. Could have done a lot of things. Everybody could do a lot of things, and they don't. We don't charge people on the things that they could have done. We charge people for the things that they've done. And he just sent some bad text messages. I try to live by the rule that anything that I write on the phone or an email or anything that I speak is sort of going to be memorialized. And I'm careful about my text messages, but most people aren't, right? A lot of people aren't. They don't think that way. And, you know, if this guy was having fun, he was in a group text where they're all just slam dunking on the government and having fun. We're going to take these people out and all that stuff. It's bluster talk, but it's not criminal in my mind. It's not a serious threat. We have Suki Love says, how can we trust the votes in 2 years? I don't trust it at all. Well, it is a concern, I would say. I think that a lot of people are going to be in your boat. A lot of individuals are going to be distrustful of these forthcoming elections. My solution has been, or my proposal, I don't know that it's a solution, but it's to start locally. So in 2022, we'll have another round of congressional elections, and we'll have a third of the Senate is going to be up for re-election. Locally, you can get involved and see how they're running things. I mean, I'm pretty interested now in seeing how, I don't know if I'm going to do it yet or not, but I may go down and be a poll watcher in one of these places. We'll see. We have SSW Lamb. Rob, is it time to move from WhatsApp to Signal? WhatsApp will be sending personal data to Facebook. Signal is being endorsed by Elon Musk. Great show. Thanks, SSW Lamb. Appreciate it. So I really try to stay away from Facebook. I mean, just personally, I don't I have an account. We program the show on here. So we have, Robert Gruler ESQ over there on Facebook. You can follow us over there if you do use Facebook. I don't use Facebook. I have an account. I have posted a lot of stuff on there for a long time, a lot of friends and stuff, but I just don't personally like it anymore. I mean, same with Instagram. About the only social media that I use still is Twitter, and I use that largely because I do the show. It's show prep. But I have found myself, when I'm using Facebook, when I'm using Instagram, getting angry, just getting riled up. And I talk about this a lot here, about that pellet, that anger pellet that feels so good. You like to get riled up. You like to get pissed off about Joe Biden and Donald Trump and impeachment and rioters and the Republicans and the Democrats. And, it's just like this nonstop thing. And you sort of work yourself up into a frenzy. And Facebook's very good at helping you press that button and get that pellet, get that dopamine hit going, oh, yeah, that's angry. And I felt myself getting a little bit too much of that. So I just kind of stopped using it. I put a timer on my phone for, I think, 10 minutes a day, and it was sort of weaning myself off of it. Now I don't even check it anymore. I really don't. And it's just not something that I use. I've never used WhatsApp either. I think that WhatsApp is more for sort of I think it's a European or global thing. Not many Americans that I know use it. Everybody still just texts here. And so, Signal was a good one that I heard of. And then the other one was Telegram. So I've downloaded both those apps actually, but I haven't played around with them. I just want to I want to get a feel for what some of the other technology looks like now that there's this massive deplatforming across the board. And I was poking around on Telegram's website, and I liked some of their marketing messaging about how they think about privacy, security, encryption. And I'm excited that there are other solutions that are out there. So in my mind, yeah, I would certainly get off of stuff that it keeps you closely connected to Facebook. Kenneth Fielder, Rob, have you had a chance to review what I have sent via Discord? I do not know, Kenneth. I do not know, because I don't know what you're referencing. I have not gone through. I do have a significant amount of messages on Discord that I need to go through, and I will probably do that tonight. So if you, I'll do that tonight after the show. I don't know what you're referencing, so I can't tell you if I've seen it or not. Aaron Seavey, AZ, if arrested and the charges are dropped, no plea deals, etc., why arrest stay on record? Shouldn't it be mandatory drop? Convicted felons have it better. Yeah, so this is a complicated question if you're asking about Arizona law there, Aaron. So if you are arrested in Arizona and your charges are later dropped, there will be a public record of the fact that you were arrested and charged with a crime. You'll see that it was charged, and you'll also see a disposition that says it was dropped. It's just part of public record. So just the fact that you got arrested and charges were filed means it's going to be a part of public record. There is a mechanism that you can use. It's called a petition for innocence. It's a very sort of arduous, it's not arduous, but it's a little bit more complicated than I think it should be, where you can go and you can ask our Department of Public Safety, which is the clearinghouse for criminal records. You can say, if I was 100% innocent, if it truly was a unlawful arrest, you can submit this petition and ask for that entirely to be removed from your record. But if you just got your charges dismissed, if you just negotiated a plea deal or did a diversion, meaning you took some classes in exchange for getting the charges dismissed, it's going to stay on your record. And that's where it becomes problematic. It's another good reason why people should hire an attorney as early as possible if you can afford it, so that they can get in there potentially before the charges are even filed, contact the prosecutor's office, contact the pre-charging bureau, see if you can do something to prevent them from hitting the books. If you can, negotiate a plea deal before it hits the books, and you can get it dismissed in that mechanism, then you can save yourself having those arrest records. We have Tyler Wattrouse says, Lauren Boebert tweeted out Nancy Pelosi's whereabouts when the Capitol is under siege. This is attempted murder sedition. I hope Joey meets Arnold. Okay, so Lauren Boebert, she's I think a new congressperson who just got elected. She tweeted out Nancy Pelosi's whereabouts. So that's curious. I kind of recall seeing something about this. Did she specifically say Nancy Pelosi is in that room, or did she say the speaker has left the chamber? Because they're a little bit different, right? Like, she left the chamber. I can understand that saying, being a signal that no, she's not here. Go look elsewhere in the building, or it could just be reporting the news. If it's something like Nancy Pelosi is in a bunker at this location, yeah, that is not good. We have Kenneth Fielder. Let's remind people about all the incitements done by Maxine Waters, Ayanna Pressley, Chuck Schumer, the harm caused by Nancy Pelosi. Kenneth, we played a supercut of that yesterday, and it's going around on the internet. If you missed that, check out yesterday's show or grab the slides or just look it up on YouTube. I mean, there's supercuts all over the place. A lot of really bad language from the Democrats. Double standards, though, on how it's being treated. Mazier Gorbani says some of the Democrats took the attack strategy to divert attention from themselves. America, stay on track. By the way, I loved Arnold. Now I'm not so sure. So, Arnold is I think an awesome guy, and he's trying to to stay relevant, and he sort of identified himself with a lot of the liberal causes. That's all right. We'll still love Arnold. Huge fan of the Terminator movies too. Teacherman 1955. If con is the opposite of pro, then Congress is the opposite of progress. Love the way you make the law understandable to the layman. Go Rob and Faye. Thank you, Teacherman 1955. I like that. Congress is the opposite of progress. It's true. It really is true. Although I'm not sure that they're set up to do much of anything. I think one of the brilliant parts of what our founders did is they made it hard to get anything done because they knew that Congress would be just a mess, as most government bodies are. So they made it difficult for them to mess things up quickly. They're still doing it slowly, but not quickly. We got Durag O'Sullivan says, Rob, talk to Robert Barnes. Yeah, I would love to talk to Robert Barnes. We've crossed paths a couple times on Twitter, sent some things back and forth, and we haven't reached out to set anything up with him. I'm trying to figure out how to do that, right? I want to figure out how to incorporate more content onto this channel without being overwhelming, because we did that several months ago. We actually were doing a live show, and then we would clip the live show into smaller little tidbits so that people could watch the little tidbits instead of watching the live show, which is like almost 3 hours long at this point, right? It's a lot of content. I don't know how many people watch a full 3 hours. But the point is, we're trying to figure out how to structure these things. So maybe a shorter show and more segments, or interviews that I pre-record and release on the weekends, or maybe I just start coming in and doing shows on the weekends. We don't know yet, but I'm trying to figure that out. Robert Barnes is certainly on the list. There's a lot of other people on the list. I would like to start doing more interviews, maybe go on other people's shows and just produce more. We're trying to figure out how to level that up. I've, of course, got to figure out my schedule with the law firm. There's a lot of other responsibilities here, so it's just kind of a lot to juggle, but we're going to figure it out. We are going to. And thank you for the suggestion, Durag. Kenneth Fielder says, Rob, yes, Rob, I sent you a link to Victory video that covered that very thing and a report about some officers being sent home. Cool. Yeah, I'll check that out as soon as we get off here, Kenneth. And our last one is from Beth Coddington. Do you get Netflix, Robert? If so, watch The Family. Oh, here it is. Do you get Netflix, Robert? If so, watch The Family. It's a part series, very eye-opening. All right. I'll check that one out too. I'm looking for a new Netflix series. I just started watching the Alienist over on HBO Max. It's pretty good. Sort of, what the heck is going on in that show? Well, there's a lot going on in that show, but it's sort of like they take you back into, I don't know what era it is, 1800s, and it's sort of like a very rudimentary forensics taking place. They're sort of matching fingerprints and stuff before any of this technology took place, and they're also doing profiling on the investigation of serial killers. But it's all in this alternate universe taking place in a much earlier time period before we had any of this stuff in reality. They were trying to figure it out. So it's kind of a fun show. But I will check that one out also, Beth. And that's it, my friends. That's it for the Super Chats. I'm so grateful for those. There was a lot of them today. Thank you for that support. Before we close out the program, a couple quick things. Want to remind you to subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. We would appreciate that. A like, a thumbs up, a share to your friends. Inviting people to come and join us on the program is always helpful. We have Miss Faith just sent in another Super Chat. So let's wrap this one up. We got Dennis Mitchell says, please don't change. Going to try my best, Dennis Mitchell. Going to try my best. I'm going to try to grow. I am going to try to grow. I'm going to try to learn a lot more and be a little bit more articulate and produce some more content. But I do have some core values that I try to stick to: authenticity, integrity, and service. If I can be authentic, that's best for me. It's best for you. If I can do things with integrity, the whole world wins. And if I'm always being of service, then I know I'm moving in the right direction. Those principles, those aren't changing. Some of the stuff around the margins may, but I'm going to try to do my best to hold true to those things. And so As I said at the beginning of the program, the slides are available for your download if you want to see some of the sources or look at the source material. They're available in Discord, which is a free chat service. Head on over there. People are chatting before or after the show. I'm going to hop on there as soon as we get off tonight because I got to clear out my inbox a little bit. We'd love to have you there. There's a copy of my book, not this, because you can't put a physical copy in a Discord chat server, but there is a PDF. It's called Beginning to Winning, How to Fight Your Case and Succeed in the Criminal Justice System. You can also grab a copy of my a copy of my Existence System. We went through a little bit of a workshop on January 1st this year. That content is just evergreen. It's going to be the same for some period of time. I may do some updates down the road, but that's available for free. I want you to get stuff, use it, and hopefully implement some good things into your life. And if we can help with that, we're happy to do so. The last thing, of course, is I am a criminal defense attorney. That is my law firm. We have an amazing team of people here who love to help good people who've been charged with crimes, want to help them navigate through the criminal justice system so that they can get their lives back on track, come out of the system better than before, move things in the right direction. We're very good at what we do. We offer free case evaluations. Come on in to our office. Anybody in Arizona who's been charged with a crime, that's where we help. So if you know anybody, we'd be honored and humbled if you trusted us enough to send your referrals our direction. Other than that, my friends, that's the end of the program. But it's not the end of the show. We are going to be back here tomorrow, same time, 5 p.m. Arizona time. Which is Mountain Time, 4 p.m. on the West Coast, Pacific time, 6 p.m. Central Coast over in Texas, 7 p.m. on the East Coast. We will be right back. We've got a lot more to dissect. We're going to continue forward. We would love you to join us on it. Otherwise, have a very wonderful evening. I will see you tomorrow. Sleep well. Bye-bye.